Hello everyone. If you like this audiobook and want to listen to more, please consider subscribing. And if you like this video, like it as well, that it enjoy.
Chapter 1. Alright, let's try this again. The first thing you learn in Musudafu is that park benches are designed by sadists. Specifically sadists who had never experienced comfort themselves and probably wanted to spread the feeling to everyone else. I shifted against the metal armrest digging into my ribs as I sat cross-legged on the park bench at 3:32 p.m., notepad balanced on my knee, pen hovering over a fresh page of what looked like an extensive management list for superpowers. The pen scratched along the side of the page. I leaned closer as I reread my options, tongue poking out absently to the corner of my lip. It was something I'd always done when focusing. No clue where I picked it up. Around me, Musudafu was up and running. Dogs running around chasing sticks and frisbees, owners shouting, "Good boy," and handing out treats, salarymen speedwalking toward train stations. It was truly a nice city. At least that's what I'd made out in the past 3 weeks since I'd faceplanted into this reality. 3 weeks. Here I was, still cross-referencing uses for my own superpowers like a grade schooler trying to figure out how to properly spend a $2 bill. Note to self, the problem with having the Rinnegan was simple. The thing was a chakra furnace consuming life force by the gallons. By that I mean a metaphysical fuel formed from a blend of physical and spiritual energy that circulated through a person's body like a second bloodstream. I had one. I'd confirmed that much in the first week. The problem was the quantity. Day 1 had been a nightmare. I'd activated the Rinnegan for the first time while panicking in that alleyway, and within 10 seconds the world had gone supernaturally crisp and sharp and impossibly detailed. 5 seconds, I felt like my marrow was being replaced by liquid nitrogen. 10 seconds later, I'd nearly shriveled into a human raisin before I hit the off switch, which was a loss of consciousness. When I woke up I couldn't move for 2 hours. Luckily for me, I was found by a female restaurant owner and force-fed dozens before I could die of hunger. You would think superpowers came with basic safety mode programming. The next 2 weeks had been a slow, frustrating process of figuring out exactly how little I had to work with. The answer, in the most generous possible framing, was, not much. Enough to activate the Rinnegan briefly without immediately collapsing. There was enough to use the base path abilities for a few seconds before the drain warning hit. Not enough to really sustain anything for prolonged combat. Never judge a man before stepping into his shoes, they said. "Oh Kakashi, how wronged you must feel being reduced to a unit of chakra measurement." Too much. Did I forget to mention that I have the Rinnegan? The ultimate dojutsu from the Naruto universe, awakened only by 3 people in the entire series. No, those space aliens from Boruto don't count. Well, technically speaking, Sasuke was given his and didn't awaken it either. And his was a 6-tomo Sharingan. Did Kagaya have a Rinnegan though? Or was that a Rinne Sharingan? Probably. I'll get to the how later. For now, just know that I have the Rinnegan I that only Sasuke and Madara managed to awaken. Emphasis on the word, awaken. In every term, I was just like them. Unfortunately though, I didn't get a full package. Sighing, I flipped through my notepad, reviewing 3 weeks of trial and error as the absurdity of my situation hit me again. I was in the world of My Hero Academia, sitting on a park bench designed by sadists, with powers from Naruto that I couldn't even use, all because some cosmic entity dropped me in this situation and conveniently forgot to give me the full fuel source. Luckily, I had come with the full chakra system. From the day I awakened in the Naruto universe, my chakra had grown with each new day. Now, 3 weeks later, I was genuinely surprised how much the reserves had gotten, allowing me to use it without being at death's door right after. 3 weeks ago, I was the KDOG, 16-year-old high school student whose biggest achievement was reaching diamond rank in League of Legends. Now I was back to being Kenneth. Hopefully, my browser history died with me as the transmigration had been somewhat thorough, same face and body, just different universe. What was worse, I had practically been picked up and thrown into this world exactly as I was during what I would assume to be my final moments on Earth. Well, my last memories ended in the bathtub, so you could probably guess how I showed up. The implications that followed could also be guessed. I had no money, identification, or any idea how to survive in a world where teenagers regularly committed acts of urban destruction in the name of heroics. No idea how to go forward. No way back home. My stomach growled. God, how embarrassing. I covered my head in shame at the looks of young school girls passing by me. 3 weeks of restaurant leftover meals and park bench sleeping had officially brought me to my lowest point in history. Honestly, I was lucky I could even get anything to eat. The kind lady who saved me had a grumpy husband who was a mechanic. Caring for a street rat, as he so affectionately called me, nearly put both at odds. Hence I lived on leftovers, slept outside, and didn't push my luck. Thankfully, minus her husband who was a total douchebag, good people still existed to prevent honest people like me from being tempted by the dark side. Ahem, not that it would have worked anyway. Let me rewind to where this cosmic joke began. Just 3 weeks ago, I was nobody special. Back on Earth, life was a carefully curated series of 4 walls and a glowing screen. I lived in what the social workers called a transitional housing unit. To everyone else, it was just Unit 4B, a cramped, 3rd-floor studio that smelled eternally of lemon-scented floor cleaner. By 16, the state essentially gives up on finding you a mommy and daddy, and pivots to making sure you don't starve to death before they can legally stop paying for you. I was their success story because I was invisible. I didn't do drugs, I didn't join a gang, and I didn't cause trouble. I went to school, kept my head down, and raced back to the one thing that made the orphan label disappear, my rig. In my situation, life practically forces you to level up, so I had it all figured out. My high school diploma was a year or so away. I had $3,000 stashed in a literal hole in the floorboards, money saved from skipped lunches and part-time tech odd jobs. I was going to age out, get a job in IT, and live a quiet, solitary life where no one ever had to care for me again. In the meantime though, I would escape reality the way any broke student does, anime marathons and competitive gaming until my eyes bled. It was during one of those 3 a.m. League of Legends sessions when everything went sideways. I was in the middle of a crucial ranked match, about to secure my promotion to Diamond, when a pop-up invaded my screen like digital cancer. You have been selected for interdimensional transmigration. Please complete your profile to continue. Are you fucking kidding me? I'd hissed, frantically trying to click around it. My teammates were probably screaming about me going AFK, but this thing had locked up everything. At first, I figured it was malware. Tried everything, Alt plus F4, Task Manager, even unplugging the damn computer. Nothing worked. The thing just sat there, mocking my uncharacteristic snarl with its bright blue interface that looked suspiciously like an RPG character creation screen. After 3 hours of digital warfare and a lot of creative cursing, I shamefully raised the white flag. Fine, I muttered, cracking my knuckles. Let's see what this elaborate scam wants. The character creation screen was surprisingly sophisticated. Destination worlds, ability sets, customization options that would make most AAA games jealous. Hell, it was better designed than the League's client, which wasn't saying much. Select your destination world. Options scrolled past. Bleach, One Piece, Marvel, DC, Attack on Titan, X-Men, Dragon Ball, Parasite, Mad Max, SCP, Evangelion, Doom, Fallout, Akame ga Kill, Hunter x Hunter, The Last Airbender, Jujutsu Kaisen, Young Justice, Naruto, The Walking Dead, The Originals, The Vampire Diaries, The Legend of Korra, Power Rangers, Harry Potter, Berserk, Chainsaw Man, My Hero Academia, Warhammer 40k, Honkai Impact, Against the Gods, Deluo, Resident Evil, Bakugan Battle Brawlers, Monsunos, Mad Hatter Chronicles, Sonic, Kaiju Number 8, Dandadan. Now this was something. Alright. This is much more extensive than I thought it would be. My eyes nearly went sore at the options placed before me. Time to get to work then. As a self-respecting lover of media content, I took a systematic approach to it. First, eliminate anything that would get me killed in the first week. Goodbye Dragon Ball, Berserk, Warhammer 40k, and Attack on Titan. I wasn't about to get vaporized by casual planet busters or eaten by naked giants. Second, remove all the grimdark deathworlds. Walking Dead, Vampire Diaries, Resident Evil, nope. I wanted adventure, not a zombie apocalypse or blood-sucking politics. Third, avoid anything too insane powerscaling-wise. DC and Marvel had Darkseid, mutant problems, paranoid men in bad suits, Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D. intertwined, people who read minds, and worst of all, Joker. One Piece had island-busting pirates, Naruto had moonslicing ninjas, and Jujutsu Kaisen had, well, curses and Sukuna existed, which said enough. That left me with a handful of options, but one stood out, My Hero Academia. Think about it, modern society with actual infrastructure, a functioning government, and superpowers that followed mostly logical rules. Plus, the power scaling was reasonable. Most heroes couldn't level cities, there was actual law enforcement, and the biggest threats were containable. Sure, there were some nutjobs like All for One, but compared to Saiyan invasions or eldritch horrors, I'd take quirked up humans any day. I clicked it. Choose your primary ability. Now we were talking. I scrolled through the options, hoping for something broken like omnipotence, reality manipulation or time control. There was no omnipotence, and no damn search bar either. Instead, I got a bunch of adjacent abilities that seemed oddly specific. Going thought each option one by one, I scrolled through the common tier: air bending, string fruit, headhunter jutsu, cleave and dismantle, Byakugan, Monsono core, telepathy, super strength, conqueror's hockey. It didn't get progressively better. I could go from earth bending to magma fruits. From shadow clones, and the following powers could be as ridiculous as something like a refrigerator head from MHA. Can someone tell me why are there so many anime powers? The powers also weren't unique. I ran into 5 different fire-type powers on the list from 5 different franchises. Most I had never even heard of. There was fire manipulation with an X-Men in bracket, and there was another that came from Power Rangers, and a third that also came from X-Men again. I scrolled through the list, my finger aching from the sheer amount of flavor text. There were options for technopathy from a world called Mech X4, where the protagonist could control technology and pilot a giant robot. Then magic from somewhere called Every Which Way, indestructibility from Henry Danger, and way more. Finally, after who knows how long searching, I came to a conclusion. First contending tier were a Susano, Domain, Density Shifting, Bankai, Nika Fruit, Regeneration, it's from Deadpool Tech Manipulation, Rinnegan, Sharingan, Titan Transformation, Future Sight, Avatar State. I noticed nothing past a certain level in terms of offensive power. In the end, I settled for a Rinnegan and moved on. I clicked Confirm. The list refreshed. Loadout confirmed. Randomizing integration parameters. Confirm selection and submit. That was just rhetorical question. I literally couldn't go back even if I wanted to. I hit enter without hesitation. The pop-up vanished. My league match returned to normal, or what passed for normal when you'd been AFK for 3 hours and your team had already surrendered. I clicked out of the screen, thumb absent-mindedly rubbing the corner of my lower lip as I leaned toward the keyboard, tongue half visible at the edge of my mouth. A weird habit, I know. I shook my head, and logged out of my account. Looking at the clock to see the time was already 6 a.m. and time for a new school day to begin, my already ruined mood worsened. Whatever, I'll skip school today. Let's just get back to writing my novel's next chapter. I headed for the bathroom to freshen up. Barely 5 minutes later, everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying in an alley that definitely wasn't my room. The second was my body was covered in absolute filth. The third thing was the floating holographic interface hovering in front of my face. Integration complete. Welcome to My Hero Academia universe. Oh, come on, I groaned, sitting up and immediately regretting it as my head spun. The fourth was the sight of my eyes when I panicked and my Rinnegan came on without my knowledge. It was like watching through high definition, ultra HD mode. Not long after, the beautiful feeling faded and I felt like my insides had been hollowed out with a scoop. Since then I'd confirmed the basic facts of my situation. The Rinnegan was real, functional, and extraordinarily hungry. My chakra reserves when I arrived had been barely enough to survive accidental activation. 3 weeks of careful training had grown them, faster than I'd expected, honestly, which was either encouraging or a sign that the Rinnegan was doing something to my biology I didn't fully understand yet. Either way, I could hold the activation for a useful window now. As for my pupil techniques, just trying would probably kill me at this point, so as a wise man once said, do not seek death when death wasn't looking. What a joke, I muttered, the sound of my own voice pulling me back to the present. Now, as I walked down the street towards the sounds of probable chaos, I reflected on everything that had led to this moment. The week after figuring out my powers was brought with a new set of problems. Mainly the failed attempts to get legal documentation without a valid identity. Being an amnesiac, as it turns out, was not a magical solution to bureaucratic problems but a special kind of hell. I remember heading to the police station and informing them of my special situation. Then was bounced between departments for days on end, ultimately coming up with no results. The guys there didn't even have the morality to feed a starving kid seeking help. Not that I could blame them. I didn't know them, and they didn't owe me a thing. From the way they put it, kids like me with no registration weren't all that rare. Definitely uncommon, but not rare. What was uncommon was the fact that I had amnesia to boot. "Kid, you must be on the bad side of Lady Luck," one of the cops said with a sneer. He had a point. Only I knew of my true circumstances, but wasn't that another form of bad luck? The cops couldn't detain an unregistered kid, or at least saw no reason or point to doing so. Neither were any of them inclined to get me away to be registered. Hence, I could only return back to the streets with nothing. Moving on, I could see the fires burning ahead. Why was I actively heading towards danger? That was because I realized that the chances of me returning home were practically non-existent. And as I explained, the fact that I was still on the streets and struggling to survive, meant my initial plan to integrate into society wasn't going to cut it. Unlike the novels I read of MCs who found themselves in this situation, I didn't meet any good Samaritan who offered to take me in. Then I would live at their place while earning my keep at their establishment until I got my feet together before recommending me to some shady government worker who did legal ids for a certain fee. Nah, those were fairy tales around here. Turns out even in a world of people with superpowers, the homeless still existed. People with rotten quirks were the majority living on the streets. My situation, as bad as it was honestly much better than theirs. I'm not discriminating, but majority of them were ugly as fuck. They were useless too. Only people with good quirks that could aid in any industry or were strong enough to be pro-heroes, had a chance to be taken off the streets if you didn't have a family of your own. Just by the fact that villain attacks caused all sorts of property damage and life loss, many people had lost everything they had and could only be reduced to this extent. They weren't targets of saving by pro-heroes. Hee, those clowns didn't even look their way. Just posing for the camera and all that. Normal people could show more sympathy, but even they had their problems. Stepping out to help others wasn't something they could afford. What was the point of all this rant? No one was going to help a homeless kid, and I knew I was never going to get off the streets if I laid low and waited for some destiny helper to cross paths. I was a kid with no identity. That alone meant getting employment with my powers was next to impossible. Unless I went down the villain path and mixed up with some shady underground factions. Actual help in the legal way had eluded me for 3 weeks, but those weren't hard to find at all. I could bet my life on it. Laying low wasn't gonna cut it, unless I wanted to join the villain faction for stealing. Hence, the next best option that was available in this world. Being a hero. It was simple really. Find dangerous villain attacks, intervene if I could. Get noticed. Get help. Maybe charge some money for the help while I'm at it. Of course, there were risks. The use of quirks, or in my case, anything that looked like it in public without a license, was illegal. Add the fact that I wasn't in the system, showing any sort of powerful ability and having no previous identity meant taking red flags. The cops could let me go unregistered because I was just a homeless kid in their eyes. For the possibility of me having quirks. If I had any good ones, I wouldn't be in my situation. At least that's how I guess they saw it. I was right. Number 15-year-old would still be in my condition with even a moderately good power. That basically translated to me having a trash quirk at best or quirkless at worst. Even if all quirks were to be registered by law, either one wasn't worth their time finding out. Once I showed otherwise, it would be a different story. Funny how the system works. It was risky, but I had no better options. Having a good quirk could make life a whole lot easier. The Rinnegan. Well, whether it was a quirk was unknown, but it could surely pass off as one. Barely turning 15 2 months prior in my last life, I wasn't a master schemer, agent, mercenary or ex-military with clear understanding of underground power structures. Like I said, I literally had no better options. Anonymity meant hunger, so I walked toward the commotion to take this bull called life by the horns, and in doing so, made a very interesting discovery. Chapter 2. The shopping district was in chaos. I could hear the commotion 3 blocks away, screaming civilians, emergency sirens, and multiple explosions. As I got closer, the smoke got thicker and the crowd got denser. People were running away from something, which was generally a good sign that I should be running in the same direction. Instead, I kept walking forward. I wasn't the only one. In life, there were no shortage of idiots willing to risk their lives to get a look at the deadly action that would endanger them if it got out of hand. Just like me, several people who apparently weren't at the heart of the incident when it happened headed in the same direction just to see what was up. It was even more so in a world where people expected heroes to protect them and hence, they could safely sit on the sidelines and watch with little to no sense of danger. Then again, who was I to judge? Move back, everyone stay behind the line. Upon getting there, it was quite the sight. Pro heroes were trying to establish a perimeter, but they looked frustrated. I squeezed through the crowd until I could see what had everyone so worked up. In the middle of the street, a massive blob of green sludge had engulfed what looked like a teenager. The kid was struggling, hands sparking with small explosions, but the villain just absorbed the blasts and kept trying to force itself down the victim's throat. His quirk is too strong. One of the heroes shouted. We can't get close without making it worse. Where's a hero with a compatible quirk when you need one? Another muttered. Just them. Massive thuds emerged from the distance. Everyone turned, eyes lighting up at the sight of the approaching hero. Look, it's the new hero Mount Lady, she'll stop him. The giant lady approached the street, but stopped just at the entrance. Ah, my only weakness. The gigantified lady with purple horns and a humongous ass hidden inside a skin-tight uniform exclaimed dramatically as she tried to step into the street but could only get one leg through. Don't look at me wrong. She was practically causing everyone to look up and imagine what she had under as she crossed a leg over us. I need at least a 2-leg route if I'm gonna make my way through here. Well, fire and wood don't exactly make a good combination. Another hero saving several civilians with his wooden tentacles ran and avoided the fires at all costs. I'll let someone else stop this guy. In the distance, the firefighter hero, Backdraft, shot out water from his hoses to put the fires out. Don't look at me, I have my hands full here. The faces of the observers worsened at the sight. The heroes were helpless. They weren't the only ones who noticed. Perfect. This kid's explosions are exactly what I need. Once I've got his body, I'll be able to defeat All Might with one punch, the sludge villain laughed. Classic villain monologue, I thought. In reality, the actual result would be the other way around. These guys never knew when to just call it quits and surrender, while hoping their compliance would get them a lighter sentence. But that was just my internal ranting. Moving to a more important discussion, I recognized this scene. Street on fire, sludge-based villain, engulfing a blonde kid with an explosion quirk, how could I not know what scene this was? So this is the beginning of the anime, huh? That's right, I was at the sludge villain scene in Season 1 Episode 2 of MHA. Currently, the sludge villain had escaped, and was attempting to engulf the body of the main character, Katsuki Baku. Cough, Ihim. I mean, supporting character, Katsuki Bakugo. With Midoriya Izuku, the real protagonist hidden somewhere in the crowd watching alongside All Might, the strongest hero at the current point in the timeline. I took a look. Found M. It honestly wasn't hard. One was a thin kid in a black uniform with striking green hair and a look of horror, while the other was a thin man wearing oversized clothes and had blonde hair. Even in a small crowd of people with quirks, they were quite easy to spot if you knew what to look for. Plus, All Might was practically right behind me. Both were in opposite directions, and both probably didn't know the other was here at the moment. Looking at the situation, my mind went to work. Well, it shouldn't be long now. Deku should showcase the heroically idiotic act of risking his life to save. Ah, there he goes right now. My thoughts were interrupted as I saw the green-haired boy dash out of the crowd into the heat of the action. Hey kid, what are you doing? The hero Death Arms shouted in disbelief. Damn, not this brat again. The sludge villain roared with irritation as Deku charged towards him. Meanwhile, I examined the surroundings and began planning my next course of action. This should be a good scene for my debut, right? I mean, there's a tension, powerless heroes, a high-level villain, the two future protagonists, and All Might to boot. It couldn't get any better than this, could it? It was good, too good in fact. I literally couldn't pray for a better situation mainly because of All Might's presence. People who were valuable either immediately, or would be later on. Alright then, time to start selling out the powerful but systematically helpless street kid dismissed by the bureaucratic system but carrying the heart of a hero, facade, inspire some pity and public indignation for sale and have these people buy it all. Preferably quickly before All Might behind me got juiced up on heroism and determination, becoming his enormously buffed self and overcoming his time limit issue that had been used up. Honestly, talk about plot armor. Alright KDOG. You've got this. I rubbed my hands in anticipation. Remember your chosen character profile to display. Strong, confident, supremely arrogant. Sasuke style. Less edgy. You've already got the eye. You may be lacking the rest of the template, but you just have to look cool enough to pull it off without Hopefully, my mastering of my powers wouldn't sabotage me now when it counted. Now then, don't die. It is time to aura farm. I cringed at myself hype. Maybe that was too much. Never mind, first, I have to stop All Might from going Super Saiyan mode. Poor kid, no hero can stop that guy, huh? I turned around looking around in the direction of the buffing All Might as if searching for another hero. The hero juice fueling him up immediately halted upon realizing a civilian would be watching him transform. My voice wasn't loud, but for those around me, it drawn everyone's attention around us. Even Mount Lady looked down. Well, I faked as light a nonchalant shrug as I could make before raising my hand. Instantly, a pitch-black rod emerged from my hand. Cool, check. Now aim well. Don't kill anyone. Important things needed to be emphasized. Under All Might and everyone's stunned faces, I broke the black receiver off my hand, turned to see the sludge villain about to strike Deku, and activated my Rinnegan. Pull. In the distance, Midoriya, who was nearly frightened out of his wits, suddenly felt a tugging force on him before being violently hauled out of harm's way just as the villain attack struck. The crowd parted way as he flew over, only to be caught in my grasp. What just? Everyone was stunned. However, before anyone could react, I raised my arm, now reinforced with chakra, and fired. The weapon flew through the air at blinding speed, arriving before the sludge monster in an instant before piercing into its body. Just a few centimeters away from Katsuki's face. The struggling boy froze instantly, his forehead producing much more sweat in 1 second than it did throughout his entire struggle. Did I almost get Kachin? Deku was frightened out of his wits, falling to the floor in fright. Silence returned to the alley street. Bakugo, who escaped getting pierced through by inches, struggled more, only to see the hand of the sludge monster stuck in the air like it was in suspended animation. Not just the hand. The villain himself wasn't moving a muscle anymore. Everyone watched. Oh my god, did that kid just throw a... Hold on, why isn't it moving? Someone asked, bringing everyone's attention to the scene. True enough, the sludge monster had stopped moving entirely. Phew, that was close, I thought, almost sweating profusely. The visual clarity and hand-eye coordination had improved drastically after. More on that later. Now, I had a performance to get done. Phew. That turned out well, I uttered with a smile on my face as I began moving forward. The crowd automatically gave way for reasons even they probably didn't understand. Thankfully, this was the effect that I wanted. How awkward would it be if I bumped into someone who didn't move it? As I approached the sludge monster, I breathed a deep, internal sigh, keeping as much composure as I could at the moment. To take my mind off my nervousness, I mulled over the use of the black receiver and the effect I was seeing before me. Works pretty well so far, I thought, before putting that aside and focusing on my performance next. For someone who claims to want to beat All Might with a single punch, you're pretty weak. Don't you think? In my path was burning rubble. However, I made no attempt to course correct my path. People were recording this. I had to make it as iconic as possible if I wanted it to go viral. So with only slight hesitation and my Rinnegan still active, I activated a slight almighty push. The crowd watched as the fires automatically dispersed into nothing as I walked right past. Yes, I sincerely hope there were no mind readers in the area. I arrived before the villain with my bag slung over my shoulder. The heroes didn't attempt to stop me at first. Like the others, they just watched as I walked past them until I got close. Hey kid, you shouldn't. The hero, Death Arms, tried to warn me in his usual deep voice. But I paid him no heed. My body. Why can't I move? The sludge villain uttered with difficulty. Why can't I control? What have you done to me? His frightened, panicked, miserable roar resounded throughout the street. Everyone watching was stunned at the dynamics. Hopefully in the way I was hoping for. That's a bit complicated, I said to the villain. From the looks of it, it doesn't hurt, thankfully. What? It's probably because you're liquid-based and hence have no nerves to speak of. If it were a normal person, it would cause not just paralysis but extreme pain just from touching it alone, much less getting pierced through. I said while my hands reached into the sludge monster as I got a grip on Bakugo Katsuki. Sorry, it was the only way to stop you without further damage. I shrugged. Can't have you hurting anyone else. The monster didn't respond, trying to muster up some form of strength to resist what was happening. He failed spectacularly and it sold the performance. I yanked and a second later, the blonde kid was pulled out easily, setting him on the pavement where he collapsed, gasping for air. As I stood up, the sludge villain let out a wet, gurgling sound of pure malice. Even pinned by the rod, his eyes burned with murderous rage. You brat, he hissed, his liquid form quivering as he tried to force a limb to move. I'll find you, I'll wait until you're sleeping and I'll crawl down your throat. I'll melt you from the inside out. You're dead, you hear me, you're. I didn't even flinch, I just turned my head slightly, raising a single eyebrow as I looked at the pathetic, writhing pile of mud. I doubt it, after all, you're kinda weak. You couldn't even handle a single stick from a kid like me. How are you going to manage a murder? Why you? I tuned the rest out, pulling Bakugo away by the collar. Ignoring the gazes of multiple people as I advanced, my heart hammering in my chest. Never before had I experienced such stage fright. I was pretty sure I would mess up if I kept this going much longer. But that should be good enough. Upon passing the heroes, I stopped and gestured. You can focus on putting out the fires. Don't worry about that guy. He's not going anywhere. I said as I resumed walking. Just don't touch the black rod. Trust me, the experience will not be pleasant. Chapter 3. The Rinnegan in Naruto consisted of multiple abilities. The primary base was the 6 paths technique, which were technically 7 if my memory of Naruto was right. Diva path, Preta path, Asura path, Human path, Naraka path, Animal path and the 7th one, Outer path. As for the black receivers, I had forgotten which path the black receivers belonged to or if they were even part of the 6 paths technique at all or just something that came with the Rinnegan. It essentially came down to condensed chakra taking the permanent form of metal that allowed Rinnegan users to transmit their chakra to other places. In the world of Naruto, a single touch was enough to disrupt the chakra system, preventing anyone affected from using ninjutsu while embedded. Enough of it would cause paralysis and the material itself was stronger than steel. Or so I assume. I had initially been worried that the lack of chakra in this universe would make the receivers nothing more than useless condensed metal. Now looking at the sludge villain, still paralyzed, I could safely put my worries to rest. With me needing to sacrifice one of the 6 paths to gain chakra, I was worried about whether most abilities here would be affected due to the difference in the world. If anything, the paralysis effect seemed even better than it did from the anime. But that could be better looked into later on. For now, I had other problems. That was an excellent takedown, son. Death Arms slapped my shoulder, body built like a professional bodybuilder. However, who exactly are you? He asked. Ah yes, problem number 1 that was the main cause of 99% of my problems. Identity issues. For this, there was really no good solution. So I'll just have to use the same excuse I did since day 1, taken from the page of transmigrators and hope for the best. I tilted my head and gave a lazy 2-finger salute. Just a good citizen, no one special, you're welcome. I see, he replied. Well, your help is appreciated, but we're gonna need your name and quirk registry code. You are a civilian after all, or are you perhaps an intern for a hero agency? Ah, yeah, about that. I scratched the back of my head, giving a sheepish grin. I absolutely not sure I have that. Huh, yeah, I gestured. Woke up about 3 weeks ago with no memory of who I was, where I came from, or even what day it was. This quirk and this body are all I've got. His brows furrowed. Hold on, you're saying you're unregistered, at your age, no ID, no family. Before I could answer, someone else did. Oi, the familiar voice rang out like a grenade, packed to the brim with aggression. I turned. Katsuki Bakugo, still dripping with slime, was pushing himself off the pavement. What the hell was that? Supposed to be a rescue, I offered, already enjoying this. I didn't need rescuing. He exploded, literally, palms cracking with tiny detonations. I had that piece of shit right where I wanted him. I looked at him, then at the place where he had been marinating in villain goo like an angry chicken wing. Then back at him. Right, I said, completely serious. You were totally winning that fight. His eye twitched. Are you mocking me? Would I do that? Yes. Okay, fair point. That only seemed to anger him even more. You think you're some kind of hotshot. I didn't need your help. I could have handled that stupid villain myself, you wannabe. I blinked slowly, keeping my hands in my pockets. Could you though? I asked mildly, because from where I was standing, it looked like you were about 30 seconds away from becoming villain smoothie. What did you just say? I said. Kachan, maybe you should calm down. Deku interjected nervously, stepping slightly between us. He saved both of us. We should thank him. Shut up, Deku, Bakugo snapped without taking his eyes off me. And don't call me Kachan. This was fascinating. I was watching the exact personality dynamics that would define the next several months of their character's development, except now I was apparently part of the equation. The smart play here would be to de-escalate. Apologize, maybe, or deflect the confrontation entirely. Be the mature one. But I really didn't want to go back to dealing with death arms because stalling even if only for a few seconds. Besides, where was the fun in that? Look, I get it. It's embarrassing to be the damsel in distress. But believe me, I too wish I was saving a pretty lady instead of a scrunched-faced brat with the subtlety of a grenade. They'd be easier on the eyes. Why you? Around us, the crowd was watching with the kind of anticipation that suggested this was better entertainment than whatever was on TV tonight. Civilians, reporters, some heroes who had been too late to help. All eyes were on us. Phones were out, recordings were happening, my face was now public property. Great, that's enough, a voice called out, stopping whatever action Bakugo was bordering on taking. It was a wooden man. Kamui Woods, I heard Deku whisper lightly. Young man, you should be grateful that someone saved you, he said to Bakugo. As for you, if you're telling the truth about having no memory, that makes this a situation for the Quirk Regulation and Hero Oversight Bureau. We'll need to take you in for a formal debrief. I raised an eyebrow. Is that an arrest? What? No, young man, not exactly. It's, quote. Then I think I'll pass. My reply cut him off as I turned away. Did I know what I was doing? Kinda. Would it play out well? Perhaps. It's not a choice, young man. Confirming your identity is not an optional task. Really? I stood up, raising an eyebrow. I went to the police station a few weeks ago. The officers on duty didn't seem to think so. My statement caused not just him, but everyone listening to freeze. What? Yep, the one downtown. 3rd at Flores on the 2nd Avenue. I mentioned, giving the specific address. Hee, this would probably be on live television by tonight. Those police bastards, it's time you took one for my well-being. I told them I was a kid with amnesia. Didn't know who I was or where I came from. They told me to wait a bit, then bounced me across several departments across several days. Don't really think they even took me seriously. Maybe it's because I didn't mention I had a strong quirk. What followed was a moment of silence. Young man, is this true? Pretty much, I shrugged with my hands up. I was told to go to several places that ultimately didn't give me any help. A lady told me to come back to the station a few days later, but I learned she was rotated when I came back. They probably thought a kid wouldn't be on the streets if he had a good quirk. They would normally be right. So I guess the homeless guys don't matter if we aren't of any use, are we? I've been on the streets ever since. So forgive my refusal, I just find it funny how the scenario changes once I have a quirk. Everything that I just said was a mixture of the truth and my own prejudiced assumptions. Assumptions, however, based on facts. The silence stretched uncomfortably, but the crowd's murmurs were getting louder. Phones were definitely recording, and I'm pretty sure I had thrown the local police department under the bus for what would probably be the evening news. But I didn't regret it. Honestly, this was better than I could ever hope, and I had to maximize every advantage I had under this. In a world of superheroes and media attention, whoever weaponized public opinion could practically control the world. I was an illegal immigrant. It was one thing for me to use a quirk in public, but things would definitely get more complicated once I was determined to have no past background whatsoever. To avoid detention, detainment and monitoring, I had to sell this to the right people as much as possible. So instead of seeing a spy or a supervillain, they would see a kid with aspiring dreams who had a track record of being wronged by society. If the media pushed this up, which they definitely would, labeling it as the system caring more for quirks than it did people, even better. My chances had just gone up a solid 10%. The local police department said they felt sorry they couldn't help me. Hence I'm pretty sure they would be happy to know that they helped me in some way or form. Plus, I was waiting for the final deal breaker to make an appearance. Young man, the voice cut through the air like a knife through butter. Every head turned toward the source, and I had to suppress a grin as I saw All Might approaching in his muscled form. He must have transformed the moment I'd started walking toward the villain, probably during all the chaos. What perfect timing! The crowd gasped. Phones rose. Cameras zoomed in. His tall, Golden form stepped forward slowly, eyes serious beneath his brow as he looked between me, the villain, and Bakugo, who was trying not to look impressed and failing miserably. All Might stopped about 2 meters from me and smiled. I saw the whole thing. That was quick thinking, clean execution, and admirable restraint. Very impressive for someone so young. The crowd erupted in excited murmurs. All Might, the symbol of peace himself, was complimenting a civilian. This was the kind of thing that made the evening news. "Thank you," I replied. "I also accept bribes in cash or ramen." He laughed. "Ha ha ha, what a great sense of humor you have. I am glad to see that your time on the street hasn't instilled despair into your heart. However, if what you say is true, about your memory and your lack of ID, then we have a more serious problem. One that involves your safety in the law." Of course we did. It was the same thing Kamui Woods was insinuating. But coming from him, it meant another thing entirely. This was what I had been waiting for. Though that should not be a problem. All Might uttered, his signature radiant smile on full display. "You are not a criminal, nor have you harmed anyone wrongly, hence you will not be treated as such. I am sorry to hear that your experience with the institutions that were supposed to help you was unpleasant. However, your situation is quite special. Using quirks in public is against the law, even for a purpose as noble as yours. We do not reprimand it. But we do ask that you follow the necessary procedures to determine your origin and the extent of your powers. Safety of the public, and yourself, is what we pro-heroes strive for." He paused, then continued. "Your actions today were very brave. When no one else could, you stepped up to defeat an evildoer before he could harm an innocent life. That is the quality of a true hero. So rest assured that it is only a standard procedure." He continued. "The Hero Commission will want to speak with you. Do not worry. I will make sure that you get the help you truly deserve. Come now." He extended a hand. "Let me help you do it the right way." Chapter 4. Camera flash, 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 flash. "Excuse me, what's your name?" Kenneth. "Is everything you said earlier true? Are you an amnesiac?" "That's about right. How do you feel about taking down the sludge villain?" "Normal, I guess. It wasn't that difficult. I only used one move after all." "Can you tell us the effects of your quirk? Is it immobilization?" "That will take too much time to answer." "How do you feel about being bounced around when trying to regain your identity? Do you feel disappointed by the failure of the government systems set in place?" "Well, haha, please no more questions. I think our young hero over here is exhausted. He needs some rest, and time to sort out his issues." All Might said as he placed a hand on my shoulder. It had been a few minutes since I took down the sludge villain. The press clearly wouldn't let me go easily, and so I stood next to All Might and answered their questions as best as I could. Over on the sidelines, Deku was being chewed on by the heroes like in canon. As for Bakugo, let's just say he wasn't the center of attention like he should have been. His gaze had always been on us, and I could practically imagine him grinding his teeth in fury. The camera flashes finally died down once the last reporter realized All Might wasn't giving them anything more. The pro-hero smiled for a final shot, then gently but firmly gestured for space. Security, likely called in by the Hero Commission, began forming a loose barrier. I had to admit it. That was a pro move. All Might managed to block more questions while still making me look like a dignified victim of the system. "All right, young man," he said in a lower tone, stepping closer as the crowd thinned. "Let me escort you to the proper office. The Hero Oversight Bureau and Public Registry should have the equipment we need." I blinked. "You're coming too?" "Of course, I promised to get you help and I'm going to make sure of it. I might not stay long though, as I have a time-sensitive matter I must attend afterward." Right, he was probably due to go deflate into Skinny Might any minute now. "Understandable," I said, shrugging. "Led the way, symbol of peace." Meanwhile, Bakugo Katsuki watched as we departed, eyes blazing with explosions and fist clenched tightly. Hero Oversight Bureau Musudafu Logistics Branch. And in other news, a mysterious teen hero appeared out of nowhere today to neutralize the villain that had even the pros cornered. Speculations swirl around his identity, especially after he claimed to have no memory, and a power that appears entirely undocumented. Sources say he's being taken in for questioning by the Hero Public Safety Commission. More on this after the break. Just as I expected, my actions had made prime-time evening news. Good news, I was famous. Bad news, I was famous. It didn't really matter anyway. In a world filled with superheroes and criminals popping up almost every single day, my newfound popularity would fade away after 3 to 4 days of no follow-up. Even back on Earth, nothing lasted forever and the media would always be captured by the next hottest thing. Time washed away everything. I tuned out the news report about my heroic actions as I focused back on my current location. The Hero Commission building was exactly what you'd expect from a government facility. It had lots of marble, unnecessarily high ceilings, and special fluorescent lights. I sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair outside what I assumed was an interrogation room, though they'd politely called it a consultation office. My bag was on the floor beside me, and I was doing my best to look like a confused, grateful teenager instead of someone who knew exactly what kind of bureaucratic nightmare he was potentially walking into. All Might had accompanied me this far, but I could see the strain on his face. His muscled form was already looking less impressive than it had 20 minutes ago, and there was a thin sheen of sweat on his forehead that had nothing to do with the building's air conditioning. "You sure you don't need to head out?" I asked. "I mean, you probably have other hero things to do, right?" He gave me that trademark smile. "Nonsense. A hero always sees things through to the end. Besides, I promise to make sure you get the help you deserve." "Right, and you're probably running out of juice fast." I thought. "Should be what, another hour before you deflate completely." "I appreciate it, but really, I think I can handle things from here." "You've already done more than enough." "Young Kenneth," All Might said, and I had to suppress a wince at the formal use of my name. "I understand you may feel like you need to handle everything alone, but that's not how heroes work. We support each other." Before I could respond, a door opened and a woman in a business suit stepped out. She was maybe in her 40s, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a bun and tired eyes that seemed to remind me of someone. "Kenneth?" she asked, consulting a tablet. "That's me. I'm Agent Yoshida from the Hero Commission's Quirk Registry Division. We've finished running your preliminary scans, and we're ready to proceed with the interview." I stood up, slinging my bag over my shoulder. "All right, let's get this over with." She paused, looking between me and All Might. "I should mention, All Might, that this is typically a private consultation. Unless you're here in an official capacity." "I'm here as young Kenneth's advocate," All Might replied. "Given his unique circumstances, I believe he deserves to have someone in his corner." Agent Yoshida nodded. "Very well. Please, both of you, come in." The consultation room was smaller than I'd expected, with a metal table, a few chairs, and what looked like some kind of scanning equipment in the corner. There was also a one-way mirror, because apparently even hero commissions couldn't resist the classics. "Please, have a seat," Agent Yoshida said, settling into her chair and opening a thick folder. "Now, Kenneth, I want to start by saying that in truth, what you've done today is illegal." Her words made All Might frown. "However, you've done it with good intent and it can be overlooked. Using your quirk to save lives is exactly what we hope to see from citizens with powerful abilities. However, we do need to understand your situation better." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "I understand." "Good. Now, you mentioned to the press that you have amnesia and have been living on the streets for approximately 3 weeks. Is that correct?" "Yes. And you also mentioned that you went to the police station on 3rd and Flores but didn't receive adequate assistance." "Here we go. That's right. I told them I couldn't remember who I was, but they just bounced me around between departments. I got the impression they thought I was just another homeless kid making up stories." Agent Yoshida made a note. "I see. And during that time, did they take any biometric data? Fingerprints, DNA samples, anything like that?" "No. They took my statement, but that was about it," I said. "Honestly, I didn't pursue that issue. I was a stranger in this world, hence it would all turn out blank anyway." She frowned. "That's concerning. Standard procedure for unidentified individuals should include at least basic biometric scanning." She made another note, this one more aggressively. "We'll be following up on that." "Good. Let them think it's just bureaucratic incompetence." "So what happens now?" "Well, first we need to get you properly registered in our system. That means a full biometric workup, quirk assessment, and background verification. Then we can discuss your options moving forward." She gestured to the scanning equipment. "The biometric scan is completely painless. It'll take maybe 5 minutes, and then we'll know exactly who you are." I stood up, trying to look more nervous than I felt. "And if you don't find anything, then we'll figure out next steps from there. But don't worry, one way or another, We'll get you the help you need. The scanning process was surprisingly quick. A few minutes under some kind of fancy camera, a quick fingerprint scan, and a cheek swab for DNA. Then it was back to sitting and waiting while computers somewhere in the building tried to figure out who I was supposed to be. The results should be ready in about 10 minutes, Agent Yoshida said, closing her tablet. In the meantime, why don't you tell me about your quirk? I saw the footage from today, but I'd like to hear your perspective. This was the tricky part. I needed to sound like I was being honest while revealing as little as possible about the true nature of my abilities. I'm not entirely sure how it works, I began as I raised my hand and a black receiver emerged from it. I know I can create these black rods that have a strong paralysis effect on whoever it touches. Then there's my eyes. I turned on the Rinnegan next. It's more complicated to explain. I can basically push things out of the way and pull them towards me. That's as far as I know of. Interesting. Have you tried testing the limits of these abilities? A little. I shrugged. I haven't really had a chance to experiment much. Understandable. And you said you don't remember manifesting these abilities before your memory loss? No. As far as I know, I've had them since I woke up 3 weeks ago. All Might leaned forward slightly. Young Kenneth, is there anything else you can do that you haven't mentioned? I hesitated, as if trying to remember. Maybe. I do know that I'm very strong though. That's how I was able to toss that rod at such speed. A soft chime from Agent Yoshida's tablet interrupted the conversation. She glanced at it, then frowned. That's odd. What is it? I asked. She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes moved across the screen once, then again. Then she straightened. All Might, she said, tone shifting subtly, I'm going to need a moment. That got his attention instantly. What's the matter? Agent Yoshida turned the tablet slightly away, as if instinctively limiting visibility. The biometric scan returned, inconclusive. I blinked. Inconclusive? That shouldn't happen, she muttered, more to herself than to me. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen. Fingerprints don't match any national registry. DNA isn't resolving against civilian, criminal, or quirk user databases. That just means I'm not in the system, right? I said, shrugging lightly. Isn't this the same thing that happened back at the police station? Yes, but even then, she paused. This isn't just, not found. The system is flagging structural inconsistencies. I don't follow. Agent Yoshida then turned the tablet toward All Might. I couldn't see the full screen from my angle, but I caught fragments. Genetic marker divergence detected. Quirk factor signature, undefined. Secondary energy pattern present. Classification, unregistered, non-standard. Well, guess I saw that one coming. Chapter 5. I see, All Might said quietly. That was not the reaction I wanted from the symbol of peace. I tilted my head. Okay, now you're both making it sound like I'm about to explode or something. Agent Yoshida exhaled, chuckling slightly at my words. That's too much of an exaggeration. You're not in any danger, she said. But your scan results don't match any known quirk classification model. Meaning, she began, your biology is behaving outside expected parameters, even for quirk users. I let a beat pass. That sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. I feel fine. That's exactly why it is a concern, she replied. From the preliminary scans, the system attempted to isolate your quirk factor for classification, but it couldn't. Couldn't? Yes. In standard cases, a quirk factor presents as a measurable biological pattern on evaluation. Something we can categorize. Emitter, transformation, mutant, even hybrids follow known structures. From what you told us in your display, we assumed perhaps your quirk factor resided in your eyes and hands. She looked up at me. Eyes heavy with scrutiny. Yours doesn't align with any of them. In fact, we couldn't really find anything that resembled a quirk factor model in your body. I leaned back, mind racing. So what? I'm a rare case. That's, well, from my view that shouldn't exactly be rare or shocking. That's true, she admitted. But even rare quirks still follow internal logic. It's somewhat strange that yours doesn't. That landed. Even All Might didn't immediately respond this time. I clicked my tongue lightly. All right, so what happens now? You throw me in a lab and poke me with needles? No, she said immediately. Nothing like that. We're not villains, she said, reaching for her phone. Though we might need to call in a specialist better suited for this. At minimum to observe him during active use. Static scans are not enough anymore. There it is. All Might raised an eyebrow. From the commission? Not directly, she said. This falls into a gray area between quirk physiology and medical anomaly. She tapped her screen again. I'm requesting a consult from someone with a high-resolution biological analysis quirk. Preferably someone who can interpret irregular quirk factors in real time. I frowned slightly. That sounds excessive. It's precautionary, she replied. Do not worry. This is for your safety. And your curiosity, I thought. All Might nodded slowly. That seems reasonable. Of course he'd agree. Agent Yoshida turned back to me. The specialist is local. If she's available, she can be here within the hour. I exhaled through my nose. All right, not like I'm going anywhere. Splendid. All Might gave me a reassuring smile. Have no fear, young man. Whatever this is, we'll get to the bottom of it. Yeah, I thought. That's exactly what I'm worried about. Time passed. I sat there looking bored, all while preparing 666 possible escape plans for when things go south. I was unfortunately still at Plan 1. To be fair, I only began a few minutes ago when All Might finally seemed to be at his limit, dropped a few lines of, "There seems to be an emergency, please treat young Kenneth well," and disappeared at superspeed. If that hadn't happened, there wouldn't have been a possibility for a Plan 1 to begin with. Seriously, when's this specialist gonna? I was mid-thought when a set of footsteps came from the hallway. Following which, the door was pushed open. A woman stepped in wearing a white medical coat, sleeves neatly folded at her forearms, tablet in hand. She was maybe in her early 40s, with dark hair streaked with gray. Her eyes swept the room once. Agent Yoshida, me. The empty chair beside the table. Then she stopped. So you're the subject, she said calmly. Agent Yoshida stood up. Dr. Takumi, thank you for coming on short notice. Ah, so this was the specialist. The doctor didn't respond to the greeting right away. Instead, she stepped further into the room and closed the door behind her. No formalities. I was already briefed, but do tell me what the situation is. You said unclassifiable quirk factor, she said. What specifically did the scan flag? Secondary energy pattern with no biological origin point we could identify. No standard quirk factor structure. Genetic markers diverging from known classification models. Yoshida handed over the tablet. The woman reviewed it without expression. We were hoping you could give us something more specific. I can. She set the tablet down and looked at me again. May I? I raised an eyebrow. May you what, exactly? Use my quirk, to get a clearer picture of what the scan was picking up. She said it plainly, without apology or embellishment. It's more precise than the equipment you have here. It won't take long and it isn't uncomfortable. I looked at her. You're the specialist, Takumi Akira. I consult for the Commission on Medically Complex Cases. She pulled the spare chair across from me and sat down, forearms resting on her knees. Do I have much of a choice here? She smiled, then turned on her quirk. The next moment, her eyes turned red. I raised an eyebrow. If not for the clear lack of missing tomokamas, I would almost think she had the Sharingan. The silence stretched for about 15 seconds. I watched her face shift through different expressions quickly. Well, she was definitely seeing something to look like this. Bullshit quirks, I thought. During this period, I tried my best to empty my mind of any thoughts and stay as still as possible. I had no idea what this so-called specialist's quirk was. For all I knew, it could be mind reading, telepathy, brainwave reading, or something that had to do with mind control. From what I remembered of MHA, this type of quirk hadn't shown up to where I watched, but it would be stupid to assume it didn't exist in a world of superpowers. Finally, after 10 seconds, her red eyes faded back to normal. Well, she said, to no one in particular. Agent Yoshida leaned forward. Dr. Takumi. Akira was quiet for a long moment. The scan was correct that there's no standard quirk factor, she said finally. What it was picking up as an anomaly is a secondary circulatory system. An energy-based semi-metaphysical one rather than biological. From my understanding, it doesn't interact with normal tissue the way a quirk factor does, which is why the classification equipment couldn't categorize it. A secondary circulatory system, Yoshida repeated, clearly stunned. I was the same. Secondary circulatory system, hold on. That's my chakra pathways she's talking about. My eyes narrowed, peering into those red eyes that weren't red anymore. Could those be a knockoff Sharingan or something? How the hell did it get into MHA? Or did Danzo misplace a Sharingan from the Uchiha massacre or something? Yes, running parallel to the nervous system. Branching through the same pathways but operating on different energy entirely. She paused. It encompasses almost every single cell in his body. And the number of cells in his body are 3 times that of a normal person's. The closest analog I have is the theoretical framework for how ambient environmental energy might interact with biological tissue in certain rare mutation-type quirks. But I've frankly never seen anything like it in a human subject. Agent Yoshida frowned. No precedent. Is it dangerous? Her question left me stunned. How could my own chakra system be dangerous to me? From her perspective, however, her worries weren't unfounded. The MHA world was filled with all sorts of weird quirks. Those with side effects or incomplete effects were quite common. She remembered a clear scenario of an individual whose quirk was literally to create diseases, only to have no resistance to the diseases he created himself and died as a result. Not inherently. The system appears stable and integrated. It's not fighting the biology around it, but rather coexisting with it, though it does need proper attention to avoid later problems before they arise. She looked at me with curious eyes. How long have you had it? Since I woke up, I said. Woke up, ah, I see. She had been briefed about my situation, hence most likely knew I had amnesia. Agent Yoshida looked at her tablet, then at Akira, then at me, then back at her tablet. So where does this leave us in terms of classification? Akira exhaled through her nose. None, she said. None. There is no valid quirk classification model that fits what I'm seeing, Akira clarified. Which means standard quirk registration frameworks don't apply cleanly. You'll need a custom classification. She stood, straightening her jacket. I can write up what I observed for the file. It'll give you more than the scan did, at least. That would be helpful. Yoshida made a note. I raised a hand. So what happens to me now? Agent Yoshida looked thoughtfully at her watch. It's getting late, so it's inadvisable to do more today. Agent Yoshida said, rubbing her eyes. But we still have the issue of placement. We can't officially process a residency permit until Dr. Takumi finishes the custom classification report, and standard youth shelters aren't equipped for non-standard physiological monitoring. Well, all roads lead back to Rome. For a moment, Agent Yoshida had a headache. Until my classification, putting me in a standard shelter wasn't ideal. Leaving me alone was out of the question, and leaving me in an interrogation room or somewhere that was guarded was bad optics, especially with All Might involved in this. For a moment, she rubbed her temples, wondering what to do. The room stayed quiet for a moment longer. Agent Yoshida was still staring at her tablet like it might spontaneously generate a better answer. I could practically see the problem forming in her head. No classification, no identity resolution, no suitable facility category, a living bureaucratic nightmare. Honestly, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. I leaned back in the chair, letting my gaze drift up to the ceiling tiles. If this were one of those novels, I thought, half amused, half exhausted, this is the part where the MC gets taken in by a mysterious powerful guardian who is secretly important to the plot, or whatever. Jujutsu Kaisen Gojo AMD Yuji. Chainsaw Man Denji and Makima. Hell, even Tamura Shigaraki was picked up by All for One in this same verse. Well, this wasn't an anime anymore though. This was. I'll take him. My thoughts ran into a brick wall. I blinked and turned my head. Akira was still standing where she had been, but her eyes weren't on Agent Yoshida or the file anymore but on me. Unblinkingly. Hold up. Am I missing something? For a second, my brain tried to assign it normal meaning. It felt like she was looking at a patient. You'll what? Yoshida asked slowly, breaking the silence. Akira didn't look away. I'll take him, she repeated. No hesitation, no explanation either. Yoshida straightened. Dr. Takumi, that's not how custody or placement decisions work. He is not a. He is currently unplaced, unregistered for residency, and under incomplete classification, Akira cut in calmly. Which means you are actively discussing temporary containment solutions. The word containment made my eyebrows twitch. Yoshida held up a hand. Even so, we cannot simply transfer him into your care. You are a consultant, not a registered guardian institution. I am a licensed medical authority with a clean track record and commission clearance for anomalous physiology cases, Akira replied. And I am the only person in this room who has directly observed his internal energy structure in real time. Quote. Akira continued. Furthermore, placing him in a standard facility increases risk of uncontrolled manifestation under stress conditions. His system is different from regular quirks and he has very little time actually controlling it. It might become unstable in unfamiliar environments. She paused, then added, almost like it was the simplest conclusion in the world. He needs observation in a controlled home environment. There was another moment of silence. My eyes went between the lady staring at me curiously and Agent Yoshida, who seemed to be mulling over the possibility. Okay, not to interrupt the legal battle happening over my existence, but did you just volunteer to adopt me like I'm a stray cat? She smiled. Yes, I did, unless of course, you would prefer to sleep in a foster home tonight or in a guarded building. I would happily respect your wishes. I opened my mouth, then closed it. That, honestly, doesn't sound so bad. Chapter 6. The rest of events passed in a flash, and before I knew it, I was the hallway heading outside. That turned out better than I thought it would. I thought, eyes once again sweeping my surroundings. I had been here for hours. Now I was finally leaving. Akira walked slightly ahead of me, tablet tucked under her arm. I followed. Technically, under supervision. Practically, being relocated like paperwork. How was this different from those officers and what they were doing to me? I was actually getting somewhere to sleep this time. PFF'd. Just details. Same thing, different branding. We stepped outside into the night air. The city lights of Musudafu were still alive, distant noise bleeding through the streets. A black car waited at the curb. She opened the door for me. I paused before getting in. So where am I going exactly? Akira opened the back door. My residence, she said. I remained silent. So, what should I call you? Ken. Nice to meet you, Ken. The car door closed with a soft click. I settled into the back seat. The interior smelled faintly of antiseptic and something like herbal tea. Akira started the engine. Outside, Musudafu's night traffic blurred past in streaks of light. After a few minutes, I leaned back slightly, watching her through the rearview mirror. So why me? Akira didn't respond immediately. She adjusted the mirror slightly, eyes still on the road. You mean why I took responsibility for you? Yeah. The silence returned again. A car passed on the left, headlights briefly washing the interior in white. I told you already, she said calmly. Your physiology doesn't fit existing frameworks. Leaving you without supervision increases risk to you and to others. Usually children take quirk counseling in schools, but we have no idea how much control you have over your abilities. That sounds like the official answer. I stared at the back of her head. Yeah, no, that's not suspicious at all, I thought. This was exactly how it started in stories. Calm authority figure, convenient housing, no paperwork panic. Yes, come with me, everything is normal. Next step, secret lab in the basement. Or a hidden agenda. In this case, it would be a villain operative. Or I get adopted into a government black site and told it's for my safety. My eyes narrowed slightly. Right, I muttered. Totally normal situation. Akira glanced at the mirror again. You sound unconvinced. I'm just saying, I replied, this is the kind of situation where the nice doctor turns out to be running experiments on orphans. That is an oddly specific concern. I read a lot. She didn't reply to that. Instead, after a pause, she asked, do you have any allergies? I blinked. What? Food allergies, medication allergies, environmental sensitivities. I don't know. You don't know. I woke up in an alley 3 weeks ago with no memories, I said flatly. I also don't know my favorite color or if I'm allergic to shrimp. Akira exhaled through her nose. Then we'll assume nothing for now, she said. Another pause. Do you prefer quiet environments or noise? I frowned. Is that relevant to my classification, or whatever? It's relevant to where you will be staying. That threw me off slightly. I hesitated. Anything fits. I would of course prefer somewhere I can sleep at night if that's no problem. Noted. More writing in her mental checklist. Then. Do you feel pain anywhere currently? What kind of question is that? A medical one. I feel fine. Were you hungry before this? I blinked again. What? You haven't eaten since the incident at the sludge attack site. I guess I am now that you mention it. Good. That was it. No further comment. I stared out the window again. Okay, I thought. New theory. She's not a secret villain. She's just socially malfunctioning in a different direction. The car slowed down. We turned into a quieter residential area. Houses replaced storefronts. Streetlights became spaced further apart. Eventually, the car stopped. Akira parked. We're here, she said. I opened my door, stepped out and looked up. This is your place? I asked. A modest building stood in front of me. Well, far cry from the mansion in my imaginations, but we can't all be winners. Akira stepped out as well, closing her door. Yes. I looked at the house, then my gaze wandered. I wish it didn't, because it quickly locked onto someone I recognized. And apparently, he recognized me back. For a long second, neither of us moved. Then, "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. "It's you." The familiar voice exploded from the house next door. I sighed. "Oh, great. Neighbor Ark, why are you here?" Lo and behold, Katsuki Bakugo stormed out of the neighboring house, his school uniform wrinkled and his face twisted in what was becoming a familiar expression of rage. Behind him, a blonde woman who looked like she could be his sister but was probably his mother stood in the doorway, hands on her hips. "Katsuki, what are you yelling about now?" My attention was on Bakugo. "Hello, Sparky Boom Boom Boy," I said, unable to resist the opportunity. My day had been exhausting, and antagonizing Bakugo was apparently my go-to stress relief mechanism. "Don't call me that," he roared, small explosions crackling around his palms. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Katsuki, who is this?" his mother asked, stepping out of the house and getting her first good look at me. Her expression shifted from exasperation to confusion to recognition. "This is the asshole who," Bakugo started, but his mother cut him off. "Watch your language, brat." She smacked him on the back of the head, then turned to study me more carefully. "Akira, nice to see you." Akira raised a hand slightly in greeting. "Mitsuki." That alone was enough to make Bakugo pause midrange. "You know her?" he demanded. "Obviously," Mitsuki said, not even looking at him. "Don't be dense, we're neighbors." That shut him up for half a second. I watched the exchange quietly. Oh great, I thought. They're that kind of neighbors. The long-term, shared key, borrow sugar, roast your child kind. Mitsuki's eyes flicked back to me, then softened slightly. "So this is the kid from the news," she said, crossing her arms. "The one who jumped into that sludge mess and dragged my idiot son out." Bakugo bristled immediately. "I didn't need." Yeah, you didn't need saving," Mitsuki cut in without even looking at him. "Keep telling yourself that." Her attention returned to me fully now. "So, you're staying with Akira?" I glanced at her. "Apparently. Temporarily," Akira corrected. "I was called in after he left with All Might. He needed someone to take him in, so I volunteered." Mitsuki hummed. "That makes sense." Bakugo looked between the three of us like he was trying to find the hidden camera. "This is stupid," he muttered. "Why is he next door?" Mitsuki let out a long, theatrical sigh, her hand still resting on the back of Bakugo's head like she was keeping a lid on a boiling pot. "Typical. Always bringing your work home with you, Akira. But honestly, it beats him staying in some cold government office." She turned her sharp gaze toward me. Up close, the resemblance between her and Bakugo was terrifying. It was like looking at the original blueprint for this localized natural disaster. "You've got guts, kid," Mitsuki said, a smirk pulling at her lips. "Most people see Katsuki screaming and they run the other way. He is but a minor inconvenience," I replied flatly. Bakugo's face hit a shade of red that shouldn't be biologically possible. "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to blast that smug look off your face." "Katsuki," Mitsuki roared, effectively drowning him out. "Inside, now. You still haven't finished explaining why you let a villain turn you into a human balloon today." "I told you, I had it handled." "Yeah, handled by the new neighbor." She shoved him back toward their door, but before she followed, she looked at Akira. "We're having dinner in an hour. Bring the kid. He looks like he hasn't had a real meal in weeks, and I want to hear the story from someone who isn't prone to exaggerating their own greatness." Akira hesitated, her hand on her own doorknob. "Mitsuki, he's had a stressful day. I should run a baseline check first. Feed him first, scan him later." Her tone didn't seem like she would take no for an answer. "The base blueprints indeed. 1 hour. Don't be late." With one final, warning glare at her son, who was still muttering profanities under his breath, she disappeared inside, slamming the door behind them. The street went quiet again. I stood there, bags slung over my shoulder, staring at the Bakugo residence. Of all the houses in all the cities in all of Japan, I thought, I ended up next to the human firecracker. My luck is either rank S or rank F. There is no in between. To think I would have to deal with Bakugo's shit much earlier than I planned. "Don't mind Mitsuki," Akira said, finally pushing her door open. "They're nice people, and she's right about one thing. You need to eat." I raised an eyebrow. Bakugo and the words nice people didn't have any business together. That aside, I followed her inside. The house wasn't heavily decorated, somewhat coming close to that of a minimalist. White walls, dark wood floors, and a distinct lack of personal photos or clutter. The guest room is the second door on the left upstairs, Akira said, gesturing with her tablet. Drop your things, I'll prepare some basic fluids and we'll head next door in 30 minutes. I shook my head and headed up the stairs. The room was exactly what she promised, clean and empty. I threw my bag onto the bed and walked to the window. From here, I could see right into the yard next door. Bakugo was pacing back and forth on his balcony, his hands smoking. He looked up, caught me watching, and immediately flashed an obscene gesture before stomping back inside. Yeah. Definitely has no business being near those two words. Chapter 7. The Bakugo family home was exactly what I'd expected. Loud, and somehow still more chaotic than I'd mentally prepared for. From the outside, it had looked like a perfectly normal middle-class house. Neat garden, clean exterior, situated in a quiet enough street. Inside, Katsuki, get your ass down here and help set the table. I'm busy, hag. Busy doing what? Staring at yourself in the mirror. Shut up, you shut up. I blinked at the string of profanities that followed. Yeah, war zone was a very generous assessment. Masaru, come meet Ken. Mitsuki called out, dragging us inside like the concept of personal space didn't exist. He's Akira's guest. A mild-mannered man with glasses and ash blonde hair appeared from what I assumed was the living room. He looked like a softer, more subdued version of Bakugo, if Bakugo had ever learned the meaning of indoor voice. Ah, so this is him, he said warmly. It's good to meet you. I'm Masaru Bakugo. I gave a polite bow. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry for the intrusion. None of that, he said quickly, smiling. You're a guest, and a very important one, from what I've heard. Just then, Bakugo trudged down from the stairs. Katsuki, go wash your hands and help set the table, Mitsuki ordered, bustling toward the kitchen. Akira, you sit down and relax. You look exhausted. Akira didn't argue. She sank into a chair without a word. I, on the other hand, remained standing, feeling the weight of 4 pairs of eyes, well, 3 pairs and 1 set of smoldering glares, shifting around me. The kitchen smelled incredible, a sharp, spicy aroma of curry that made my stomach betray my cool protagonist facade with an audible growl. Sit, Masaru urged, gesturing to the chair across from Akira. I took the seat. So, Masaru began, his tone a gentle contrast to the yelling that had preceded his arrival. Ken, right, Akira mentioned you've had a difficult few weeks. We were shocked to see the news today. Katsuki doesn't usually get into trouble he can't handle, but that villain looked particularly nasty. He was handled, Bakugo barked, slamming a stack of plates onto the table with enough force to make the silverware rattle. I told you, I was waiting for an opening. Waiting to be turned into a smoothie, more like, I muttered, not looking at him. What did you say, you extra? Katsuki, Mitsuki's voice boomed from the kitchen. If 1 plate chips, I'm using your allowance to buy the next set. Sit down and eat. Dinner was served splendidly as massive bowls of katsu curry were placed in front of us. It looked like the kind of meal meant to heal a broken soul, or at least satisfy a growing teenager. I took the first bite, and resisted the urge to cry. I'd been running on restaurant scraps and leftover rice for 3 weeks. Whatever Mitsuki Bakugo had put into this curry was doing things to my brain I didn't want to stop. Yeah, that alone justified coming here. Across the table, Mitsuki watched me for half a second, then smirked. Good, right, I swallowed. Yeah, Masaru coughed lightly into his hand, smiling like this was completely normal. Mitsuki looked at me curiously. So, Mitsuki said, dropping into her seat and stabbing a piece of katsu with her chopsticks. No memories at all, nothing. Mitsuki, Masaru said, what, the kid's sitting at my table. I'm allowed to ask. She looked at me without any particular malice. This was just her personality. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. It's fine, I said. No, nothing before 3 weeks ago. I woke up in an alley and figured out the rest from there. That must have been frightening, she said. Most kids would be a mess. You walked into a villain attack and made the evening news instead. Takes a lot of courage. Or stupidity. He's an idiot. Bakugo shot back, said stupidity saved your life. So in hindsight, you were saved by a stupid idiot, which by default, makes you one for needing saving from one. Why you? Mitsuki watched this, a grin splitting her features. She pointed at me with her chopsticks. You took a great pick, Akira. I like this one. Her words only seemed to enrage the blonde even more. Also, don't listen to him all the time, Mitsuki said to me, ignoring her son entirely. You saved him. Even if he'll never say it, he'll remember that forever. Quote. I blanked, looking at the murderous features of the boy across from me. Why was she making it sound like what she was saying was a good thing? Yeah, thanks but no thanks. I'd honestly rather he forgets about it and move on lest he gets fixated on me. In fact, it would be best to get him a girlfriend just to make sure. My words caused Bakugo's face to turn purple. The last thing I wanted in this life was to get involved in the toxic relationship that occurred between Deku and Bakugo. Or worse, have his trashy character attention be somehow transferred to me for whatever reason. From Batman and Joker to Naruto and Sasuke. As much as I loved my shonen protagonists, no way was I entertaining any of that shit. Seeing Bakugo truly look like he was mere seconds away from blowing up, Mr. Masaru hurriedly changed the subject. Are you planning to pursue hero work as well? The room went silent. Masaru paused, seemingly realizing that the question wasn't quite appropriate. He wanted to change it, but I answered before he could. I haven't thought that far ahead, I said. Which was a lie. I'd thought about essentially nothing else for 3 weeks. But it was the right lie for the moment. Right now I'm more focused on figuring out who I am. Masaru nodded slowly. That's understandable. His tone carried genuine sympathy. Though, Masaru added, his eyes drifting to the way I held my chopsticks. With what you showed today, the world might not give you much of a choice. The public likes a mystery, but they love a hero even more. Great. Just what I want. More people staring at my face. Mitsuki laughed and reached to rough up my hair but fell short. Tough luck, kid. Between that display on TV and Akira taking you in, you're already a headline. Well, they just don't know where you live yet. Speaking of which, she glanced at Akira, who was quietly finishing her meal. What's the plan for his education? He can't just lounge around your house all day while you're at the hospital. He'll get bored and start trying to see if he can punch holes in your walls. Akira set her chopsticks down. It's not official. For now this is a temporary placement. Whether he stays with me or not will be decided tomorrow after he goes for a full quirk assessment. Though I plan to make a few calls to the bureau so everything should work out. She said. I raised my head to look at her. Why did it seem that she was dead set on becoming my permanent guardian? Something didn't feel right. Though given his age and the need for a stable environment while we finalize his classification, he needs to be integrated into a local curriculum. I was thinking of enrollment into school. Dinner continued in a strange mix of Bakugo's low-level fuming and Mitsuki's high-decibel interrogation about what exactly I could do. Akira remained mostly silent, her mind clearly already 3 steps ahead in some bureaucratic chess game I wasn't privy to yet. By the time the plates were cleared, I was stuffed, exhausted, and more confused than ever. After dinner, Bakugo disappeared upstairs without ceremony. As Akira and I stood at the front door, preparing to head back to the house next door, Mitsuki gave me a sharp pat on the shoulder. Get some sleep, kid. Tomorrow's a big day at the bureau. And don't worry about Katsuki. His bark is loud, but his brain is, well, it's mostly focused on himself. I heard that, hag. Came a roar from the living room. Good. You were meant to. She yelled back, then winked at me. Thank you for saving my son's life. You'll always be family here. I smiled wryly and we both left under her gaze and waved. Honestly, that was hands down the weirdest dinner I had ever attended in my life. Chapter 8. The next morning found me standing in the middle of a shopping mall questioning every life decision that had led me here. People moved around us in waves. Storefront lights reflected off polished floors. Music drifted through the air from hidden speakers while massive digital billboards advertised hero brands, special gear, and seasonal sales. And right before me was Mrs. Takumi. Hands holding 3 shopping bags already. I still don't understand why we're here, I replied flatly. Isn't that obvious already? You require clothes. I have clothes. She looked at me with a questioning gaze. You have 2 shirts, 1 damaged hoodie, and pants with stitching barely holding together. They would practically be begging for death if they could speak. I stared at her. She stared back without blinking. Somehow I lost that exchange. Again. This still feels unnecessary, I muttered as we stepped into another clothing store. I trailed behind her, feeling the stares of a few passers-by. I wasn't sure if they recognized me from the news or if I just looked that out of place next to a woman who radiated high-end medical professional. You literally said yesterday this whole arrangement wasn't official. It isn't. Then why are we shopping like I'm your son? That finally made her pause slightly. Most people who were eavesdropping looked at us in surprise. Not that I cared anyway. If the Bureau decides to ship me off to some high-security boarding school or a different foster home, you've just wasted a lot of money on a kid you'll never see again. I refused to believe she was doing this from the goodness of her heart. Those were protagonist plots, and I was no protagonist. Because, she said after a moment of thought, that is generally how the placement system works. I blinked. Akira moved toward a rack of clothes while speaking. When the state handles temporary youth placements, the first priority is stability. Environment, routine, compatibility with the supervising adult, and age of the ward. She pulled a dark jacket off the rack and held it up toward me briefly like she was mentally measuring me. Most temporary placements fail because the child rejects the environment or the guardian rejects the responsibility. Okay, you are already living in my home and you have not objected to the arrangement. I have already filed preliminary recommendation forms. She handed me the jacket. That alone significantly increases the probability of long-term approval. I looked down at the jacket in my hands. Wait. Akira continued walking calmly through the aisle. The moment you stayed the night without incident, the likelihood of reassignment dropped considerably. How considerably? Approximately 60 to 70%. What? She said it so casually. I followed after her. Hold on. Seriously? Yes. You're telling me I'm already 60% adopted because I slept in your guest room one time. That is not how the system phrases it. Akira ignored my question after that. The remaining factors involve psychological evaluations, quirk risk assessment, long-term educational viability, and whether either party expresses formal objections. And if I object, she glanced sideways at me. Do you? That's not the point. It is one of the greatest deciding points. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because annoyingly enough, I didn't actually have an answer. Sure, the whole thing was suspicious. Objectively suspicious, but I knew that was mainly a me problem. I was a transmigrator with magic alien eyeballs in a superhero society. After getting booted into an anime verse by an ad, healthy paranoia was practically a survival trait at this point. But at the same time, she'd fed me, given me a place to stay, taken me seriously, asked if I was hungry, asked if I was comfortable. Honestly, for all my suspicions, the only thing I uncovered was that she was mostly just weirdly intense in a socially dysfunctional way. That's what I thought, Akira said calmly. I narrowed my eyes at her. She ignored the two and grabbed another shirt off a nearby rack. Try these. I looked down at the pile now accumulating in my arms. You picked all of these in under 30 seconds. Yes. How? My quirk lets me guess your preferences to an extent. You like dark clothing with short sleeves. Shorts over long jeans, jackets and dislike formal wear. I saw her look at me, her eyes developing what I could only describe as a teasing look. That's the classic edgy teenager look, right? Quote. I felt a vain throb in my forehead. I am not an edgy teenager. She gave an almost smile in response. All in all, she looked mildly amused. My fishy senses were tingling. Dangerous, I thought. This is how emotionally constipated mentor characters lure you into trusting them before dropping devastating backstory reveals. I narrowed my eyes suspiciously. Those were classic shonen tropes. Akira casually picked another hoodie off the rack and added it to the growing pile in my arms. Try that one as well. How many clothes do I actually need? You currently own less clothing than most hospital patients. That was unnecessary judgment. I looked down at the stack. Shirts, hoodies, shorts. A surprisingly decent black jacket. At some point this had stopped looking like emergency shopping and started looking like someone genuinely preparing for me to stay long-term. HMPH, whatever it is, it can't get the better of me. I muttered with an accusatory glance. I'm onto you. You say that often despite having discovered nothing. That's exactly what a suspicious person would say. And yet you continue following me through the mall. I need pants, I uttered shamelessly. Just get into the changing room already. I have 3 more sections to cover before we have to leave for the bureau. I let out a long, suffering sigh and trudged toward the back of the store. As I changed, I couldn't help but look at myself in the mirror. The dark hoodie she'd picked out was high quality, durable material, plenty of hidden pockets, and a cut that didn't restrict my movement. Annoyingly, she was right. It was exactly what I would have picked for myself if I had the money. Seriously, what is her quirk anyway? The changing room curtain shifted slightly. How long are you planning to stand in there? I frowned toward the curtain. What, can't I evaluate myself? You are staring at yourself in a mirror, aren't you? That is part of the evaluation process. I could practically hear the judgment in that single sound. With a sigh, I stepped out of the changing room. Akira looked up from her tablet. Her eyes moved over me once. Briefly. Then she nodded. That one works. That's it. I looked down at myself. No dramatic commentary. No, you look handsome, dear. You look fine. You really suck at emotional support. That is not one of my specialties. At least she admitted it. The cashier nearby snorted into her hand before pretending not to listen. Akira ignored her completely and walked toward another section. I followed with the bags in hand, feeling more and more like a heavily burdened NPC companion. As we moved through the mall, I noticed something strange. People stared at her, not in the attractive woman kind of way either. More like recognition. Some nodded respectfully when passing. Others whispered quietly. One man in a business suit immediately straightened his posture when she looked his way. You're famous or something? No, I looked around. It was mostly the adults who looked in her direction and there weren't that many of them. The children on the other hand didn't even so much as glance at her, so she wasn't famous in their circles. That doesn't seem like it. Akira stopped near a storefront display and picked up a pair of gloves. I am a medical doctor. Even in a world of heroes, it's a high-profile field. Plus I also do medical consultation for hero-related incidents. It tends to attract attention. Hero-related incidents. Yes, I blinked slowly. Hold on, something clicked. Medical consultant, called directly by the HPSC. People recognizing her in public. I narrowed my eyes. You deal with pro-heroes. Akira glanced at me once. Sometimes. Are you a pro-hero of any kind? No. We eventually stopped near the center atrium where several massive digital screens displayed hero rankings and advertisements. One of them replayed footage from yesterday's sludge villain incident. My face appeared on the screen. I nearly recoiled on instinct. Oh come on. The footage showed the moment I'd thrown the black receiver. People nearby immediately started whispering. Isn't that? That's him, the kid from yesterday. I pulled my hood up instantly. Akira looked at the screen, then at me. Is it strange? I didn't answer. The feeling of being watched like this was uncomfortable, to be honest. The contrast between the before and after hadn't had enough time to wear in yet. Yesterday I was sleeping in abandoned buildings. Now my face was playing on giant digital screens in public spaces while strangers whispered about me like I was some new celebrity hero candidate. Did Bakugo get this much attention when he did it in canon? With us being watched like an exotic species in a zoo, we had no choice but to leave the mall not long after. Amidst our departure, a young girl near a department store looked at the image on the billboard and looked towards my direction where she saw me quickly leaving. Hey, you. The tall girl with reddish hair barely looked up from the dress rack she was currently inspecting. Her expression was calm and overly serious. A few feet away, Nijire Hado was half leaning over the railing of the second-floor walkway, staring toward the mall entrance with obvious curiosity. Isn't that the boy from the news yesterday? Yu Haya paused. What boy? The sludge villain one, Nijire added. The one they kept replaying this morning. Yu finally glanced over. Down below, near the exit corridor, a dark-haired boy in a black hoodie was walking quickly beside a woman carrying several shopping bags. The distance was far enough that most details blurred together between the crowd. I don't see anything. You're not looking at what I am looking at. Nijire, please. We're here to find a base material for the pageant decorations, not to scout the news for vigilantes. Besides, it's a Saturday, the mall is always full of the latest thing. Nijire watched the figures disappear around the corner of the parking structure. She kept her finger on the glass for another moment. I think it was him. So, when did I argue? Yu set the fabric bolt down and picked up her notebook, returning to the committee checklist. Even if it was, he's already gone. Nijire pulled her finger back from the glass. She looked at the billboard screen across the atrium, which had cycled back to a hero ranking advertisement. Then she looked back at the corner where the two figures had disappeared. Following which, she left the railing and returned to continue picking out outfits for the upcoming school festival. Chapter 9. The shopping trip ended prematurely, you could say. The countless clothing bags would of course have something to say about that statement. By the time we got to the Hero Commission building we had departed from last night, it was late morning. There wasn't much process involved with entry. It was the same marble lobby and same receptionist as before. The elevator ride felt like forever. Not long after, Agent Yoshida met us on the 15th floor. "Ken, Mrs. Takumi, right on time, how are you feeling?" "Like I want to get this over with," I said honestly. "Good attitude, follow me." She led us down a hallway that looked every bit like the government facilities I had seen in movies. We went through doors marked with things like, testing room 3 feet in, psychological assessment, and more. We'll start with some basic questions, then move to psych eval, then physical testing, and finish with quirk demonstrations. Psychological evaluation, I asked. This wasn't where they would actually find a mind reader, would they? Standard procedure for anyone with unusual abilities, Yoshida said smoothly. Especially given your circumstances. We need to make sure you're mentally prepared to use your quirk responsibly. I see. Question: how do you psychologically evaluate someone who's technically from another world? What exactly are you testing for? Power classification and potential risks, she said bluntly and opened a door to what looked like the world's most expensive therapy office. Comfy chairs, low table, definitely not the interrogation room I'd been expecting. Agent Yoshida settled across from us, opened her folder, and began. "Ken, everything you say here is for assessment purposes only. The goal is to understand your situation and make sure you have what you need going forward. There are no wrong answers." "Okay," I said, "let's start simple. How have the past 3 weeks been for you?" "Difficult," I said, "but manageable." I leaned back into the suspiciously comfortable chair. "Honestly, bad." Yoshida nodded once and wrote something down. "Can you elaborate?" "I woke up in an alley with no memories, no money, no identification. Then I spent 3 weeks surviving off convenience store leftovers while trying not to get reported to the authorities as either homeless or possessed. How would you be in my situation?" "That does sound difficult," Yoshida said. "And during that time, did you experience any violent impulses, hallucinations, emotional instability?" I blinked. "Lady, I was homeless, not haunted." "That is not a no." "I'm not shameless enough to lie. I think anyone sleeping behind vending machines earns at least minor emotional instability. That's just human beings." To her credit, Yoshida's expression barely changed. "Did you ever intentionally use your quirk on another person before the sludge villain incident?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I am a morally strong and upright citizen who can't bear to harm even a single fly. My soul is a sanctuary of peace and civic duty," I said without hesitation and a perfectly straight face. "My principles are simply too refined for needless violence," I continued. "I believe power should be exercised with restraint, dignity, and a profound respect for all living beings." Silence. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause for a moment. Akira stiffened, eyelids twitching at the high-sounding words that just found its way out of my mouth as she resisted the urge to scoff. She knew I'd spent the last 3 weeks scavenging like a stray cat. Peace and civic duty weren't exactly in my top 10 priorities list. Yoshida, however, remained professionally unbothered. She slowly lowered her pen. "I see." She wrote something down in the cramped script of the psych evaluation report. I caught a glimpse of the header. Subject: Ken. Section: Behavioral Assessment. Then, under it, character conduct notes, either lying or extraordinarily shameless. I blinked. "Excuse me." There was no reply. "Just so we're clear, I did answer the question." "You did," Yoshida agreed smoothly. And your explanation indicates a strong tendency toward moral framing even in low-veracity statements." I paused. "That is not what I said. It is what was observed." "I feel like you're subtly calling me a liar. Teenagers have a very active imagination. Let's move on to the next section. When you first manifested your quirk, what did you feel?" "Existential horror," I thought immediately. "Confused mostly. I didn't even know what my abilities were at first." "Do you believe your quirk affects your personality?" "Number it doesn't." That sounds like the setup to a supervillain origin story. What are your thoughts on heroes? A crossbreed between celebrities with costumes and government workers who get paid on time. What do you think about licensed authority? Are these questions that should be asked to a teenager? Do you resent society for how it treated you these past 3 weeks? That one made me frown. No, I don't. No one owes me a thing, so I don't expect a thing from them. If they help me, all well and fine. Yoshida's pen paused. For the first time, She looked up from the folder and actually studied my face, searching for the crack in the facade. Most kids my age were either desperate for approval or overflowing with misplaced angst. That's quite the perspective, she noted. Most people who experience systemic neglect develop a sense of entitlement or deep-seated resentment. Answers like yours rarely come by. I doubted questions like this were told to the majority either. How many people find themselves in situations like mine? Resentment takes energy I didn't have to give. I'm pretty sure I could think of an internal monologue dedicated to bringing down society if I wasn't on an empty stomach. I said with a deadpan face. Only kids would experience that sort of shit. Agent Yoshida jotted something else down. If you were faced with a similar incident to the sludge villain scenario you intervened in yesterday, under better personal living circumstances, what would you do? As long as the person isn't in an immediate death situation, I'd walk past without so much as a second thought. I replied without a shred of hesitation. Why? Because I have strong principles and an even stronger aversion to paperwork. Quote. Akira's shoulders moved slightly. That was it. The barest tremor of suppressed amusement. Yoshida raised an eyebrow. That doesn't sound very heroic. Neither is saving the day only to get arrested and have to meet you guys again, so I guess both sides lose. Quote. Next question. Do you enjoy using your quirk? Ah. Dangerous question. I dunno. Excuse me. I haven't used it much. Nor do I have any reason to use it much. And it's exhausting if I use it much. Like walking long distances, so why should I like using it? Yoshida wrote something down. Most people your age describe strong emotional attachment to their quirk, she said. Especially after a high adrenaline incident. Well, most people my age probably weren't accidentally homeless beforehand. I shrugged lightly. I think my priorities got rearranged somewhere along the way. You don't see your quirk as special. Special? Yeah, it was special. Objectively speaking, my quirk was probably insane. But saying that out loud felt like voluntarily bringing problems for myself. So instead I leaned back into the chair and answered as usual. I think it's useful. I can achieve the dream of reaching for the remote without getting up. Only useful? I mean, I gestured vaguely. It's not exactly a puppy. It pulls, pushes things, and creates stuff that paralyses people. I'm not emotionally bonding with it. Akira's lips twitched again. Yoshida remained professionally immune to humor. Do you fear your quirk? Is the boogeyman real? Have you experienced loss of control? No. Unintended activation? Literally first ever use. Not a day after since. When did you first notice your enhanced abilities? 3 weeks ago, when I woke up in that alley. Did they all appear at once? Yeah, I guess. Were they classifying my abilities as different quirks instead of pulling everything under one umbrella? Well, I suppose trying to correlate black rods to pushing and pulling was a bit of a problem, but that should still be what they are doing. More questions followed the pipeline. What was my power and applications, side effects, possible limits, anything and everything she could possibly dish out. I answered to the best of my abilities. All right, Agent Yoshida said, concluding the verbal testing and leading me to what looked like a superhero training montage come to life. Physical testing time. You ready? Yes, though I don't really feel I have a choice. The facility was impressive, practically built with reinforced everything, equipment that looked like it cost more than most people's houses, and technicians buzzing around like this was NASA. Dr. Tanaka will be overseeing your assessment, Yoshida said, introducing me to a woman. She's one of our best quirk analysts. Ken, Dr. Tanaka said, shaking my hand with surprising strength. I've read your file. Fascinating circumstances. Yeah, it's been a weird few weeks. Excellent. We'll begin with baseline physical measurements first. Baseline, I repeated suspiciously. Yes. Strength, reaction time, mobility, stamina, quirk stress tolerances. I'm going to stop you right there. I raised a hand. You are all aware I was nutritionally challenged until yesterday, correct? Nutritionally challenged, Yoshida repeated flatly. I was homeless. I'm trying to preserve my dignity. The lab technician adjusted her glasses. That's already been factored into the evaluation. Based on our understanding of your quirk factor being somewhat metaphysical, we need an in-depth physical analysis of your body to make sure there are no complications. I see. All right, Ken, Yoshida said. We'll begin with standard physical tests. Nothing complicated. The next several hours blurred together into a scientifically advanced form of public suffering. Strength tests, endurance tests, reflex tests, brain scans, Blood pressure readings. Quirk activation monitoring. Some machine that looked suspiciously capable of launching satellites into orbit. At one point they strapped small sensor pads along my arms while I demonstrated attraction and repulsion forces against reinforced targets. At another point someone asked me to recreate the black rods. That had immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. The rods manifested slowly from my palm. Matte black metal extending outward before solidifying completely. Every monitor in the room suddenly became very interesting to the technicians. Huh, Dr. Tanaka muttered. That was never a reassuring thing to hear from scientists. What does, mean? I asked immediately. No confirmed biological composition. Excuse me, we scanned the material structure 3 separate times. One technician adjusted his glasses while staring at the monitor. It exists physically, but its internal composition doesn't fully correspond to known metallic arrangements. I stared at the rod in my hand, not really surprised by this. So I basically created a new metal. Doesn't that come with a scientific award or something? One of the technicians looked up immediately. That is not how scientific classification works. So there's paperwork involved before I become rich. Understood. Things don't work that way. Meaning, the researcher slapped his head. You are not becoming rich from this. More tests followed after that. Apparently my body reacted strangely whenever I used my abilities. My heart rate increased, but not proportionally. Neural activity spiked in abnormal regions, and a lot of other stuff I don't remember. However, they all encountered the same fundamental problem that led to this situation in the first place. We can't properly map the energy system. This was the main issue. Chakra was a mixture of spiritual and physical energy. Trying to get that on a monitoring device was next to impossible. Energy fluctuations were there, sure, but that was all they could get. Hence, trying to monitor how it reacted along my body was also impossible. My absence of quirk factors could only be chalked up to being semi-metaphysical. With Akira being the only one capable of seeing them, the only thing they could make of my powers was that the energy fluctuated whenever I used them. I sighed as I took off the last equipment on me, releasing pure killing intent on the next man who opened his mouth to say a thing about conducting tests. By the time everything finally ended, I felt like my soul had been medically peer-reviewed. I sat slumped in a chair outside the testing chamber while Yoshida finalized paperwork nearby. Akira stood beside the window reading through several pages with, "Congrats on finishing," she noted. I groaned like a stranded whale. The next moment, Yoshida approached a moment later carrying an annoyingly thick folder. "Well," she said, "your provisional assessment is complete. Is that supposed to be good news? You'll receive formal classification review later, but for now the commission has reached several preliminary conclusions." My eyes drifted to her. First, your quirk is officially categorized as a high adaptability emitter type with possible compound mutation traits. You people really love long names. Second, your abilities currently display no signs of psychological corruption or involuntary aggression. Yippee, I waved weakly. Third, due to your unusual physiology and output potential, the commission will require periodic monitoring moving forward. There it was, the government leash. I looked at her with a frown on my face. Why? Dr. Tanaka came from behind her before she could say anything. Honestly, kid, you have a very good quirk. The woman looked at me with a slight grin. I can't wait for where you'll be in the next 5 years. I didn't reply, just looking at Yoshida and waiting for an answer. It's just a minor precaution. I see. So I'm being watched for having no identity and coming to look for one. I knew it wouldn't be this easy. Even with all might, I just avoided the fate of being put under permanent house arrest. These guys wouldn't let things go that easily. It's not permanent. So when can it end? This time, Yoshida fell silent. My frown deepened. Tell me, did I do something wrong? No. That's not. Then why am I being watched like I am some criminal anyway? Didn't All Might say I would get the help I wanted? This doesn't feel like help. There was silence, then she sighed. It's fine, it's just for a month. After that you'll be free to not return. I frowned but remained silent. There was no point arguing further. Yoshida handed several papers toward Akira instead. Temporary guardianship authorization has also been approved pending final review. I blinked. Wait, already? The recommendation was accelerated following today's assessments. Akira accepted the paperwork calmly. You will remain under Mrs. Takumi's supervision for the foreseeable future, Yoshida continued. Do you have anything to say? I paused. 5 seconds later, I shook my head. No, This is fine. Good, then we are done here. The elevator ride down felt quieter than before. Too many things had happened today. I stared at the folder in Akira's hands. Temporary guardianship authorization. What a ridiculous phrase. Well, at least nothing dramatic happened. Which was, genuinely, the best possible outcome I could wish for. They tested my strength and speed. I used some basic chakra reinforcement that I was currently clumsy at, and the results were stats enough to look impressive without being alarming. My physical prowess, according to Dr. Tanaka, was off the charts for a boy my age. The rods got some raised eyebrows and a lot of note-taking. The conclusion after all that was my quirk ran on a metaphysical system which allowed me to generate both the paralysis rods as they called it alongside the secondary telekinetic push-pull function. Yes, with the slight Shinra Tensei applications I used, Dr. Tanaka was fully convinced that the Diva Path was a secondary function to help me launch the black receivers as projectiles and return them. Though that wasn't her fault as my current chakra pool didn't really amount to much. Expecting me to abuse the Diva Path like Nagato would be physical abuse in my current state. She had made a simulated display of my fighting style revolving around the black receivers as projectiles and combat weapons. The fact that they were incredibly sharp, tougher than steel, and I as the creator could easily break them apart at will despite their toughness and anyone else touching them would be inflicted with severe pain and the paralysis effect gave me a B+ rating as one of the better quirks out there. When paired with the push-pull function, that rating jumped into a solid A. Top 10 pro hero material, she said. Though considering Best Jeanist who was also a hero specialized in restraining enemies was the number 4, I could see where she was coming from. Hehe, can't wait to flash this in Bakugo's face. There was no overexerting myself to show off, and Agent Yoshida seemed very satisfied. All in all, everyone was happy. Phew, here I thought I would become a threat assessment or something. I had feared there would be secret meetings and emergency protocols after the awesomeness of my powers was displayed. I was clearly overthinking as no men in suits with earpieces appeared from side rooms. Just paperwork. A disappointingly bureaucratic ending to what I had fully expected to turn into. Classified containment protocols begin immediately. You're awfully quiet, Akira remarked as we stepped out of the heavy glass doors of the Hero Commission building. The sunlight was a bit too bright, making me squint after hours of sterile LED panels and high-tech monitors. I'm on the lookout for government agents attempting to kidnap me. Go on your daily business. Quote. Akira gave me a look. You were expecting that. I mean, I was mentally prepared for at least one dramatic chairspin interrogation. She rolled her eyes. You watch too many movies. I have no memories. For all you know, I could be from another dimension. My standards for suspicious organizations are higher than yours. That earned me a brief glance. You really do say concerning things very casually. I rolled my eyes myself. Whatever. They certainly made it look like movies. That doctor looked excited wanting to take my red blood cells. Akira hummed, adjusting the thick folder under her arm. My life, summarized in bureaucratic jargon and, temporary, stamps. She's a scientist. They live for anomalies. But don't let the excitement fool you. The interest they showed today isn't just about, fascinating, biology. We got into the car. Akira tapped one finger lightly against the steering wheel before speaking again. You should also understand something about today. People with strong quirks attract attention. From organizations, from heroes, from the public. I looked at her. Attention isn't always good, she continued. The stronger your abilities appear, the more others will attempt to define what you should become. Shortly after, the engine hummed quietly as we pulled out of the commission parking area and merged onto the city road. I stared out the window at passing buildings. Hero advertisements flashed across massive screens overhead. Honestly, huge win for me. Akira spoke first. Does the monitoring condition bother you? It is standard. That sounds wrong. I haven't done anything. It is still standard. I looked at her flatly. You know, every time you defend the commission like that, you sound more like a government operative. I literally work with government agencies. That is exactly what I mean. Akira rested one arm near the steering wheel. From their perspective, you're an undocumented minor with a very dangerous quirk. When you phrase it like that, I sound cool. Agree to disagree. Her eyes stayed on the road. The commission's response today was relatively lenient. There it is again. What? That thing you do. I pointed accusingly at her. You keep subtly trying to make me appreciate government oversight. That's not what I am trying to do. I am explaining reality. That is what people call being a functional member of society. Oh God forbid, I droned, only to see a slight smile appear on her face. I agree. Society tends to decide very quickly what useful people should do with themselves, she said, much to my surprise. After a moment of silence in the car, she adds, you do not have to let other people decide everything for you. What exactly is she saying? My eyes narrowed suspiciously. Do you have a point with this? You'll find out one day. She shook her head and didn't reply further. I raised an eyebrow, then eventually turned my attention back to the window. Sure, whatever. Chapter 10. Are you sure you have everything? Akira asked for the fourth time as I adjusted my tie in the hallway mirror. Yes, ma'am. Notebooks, pens, lunch, all accounted for. What about your phone, and your emergency contact card? I sighed, turned to face her and caught the slight furrow in her brows. What was this? Maternity instincts kicking in or something? I'm 15 not 5, I can handle one day of school. Today was Monday morning, school started in 30 minutes, and I'd spent the better part of an hour convincing her I could find my way without a chauffeur. When it came to schooling, my new guardian, for some reason I couldn't tell yet, dropped a lot of her professional aloofness in favor of becoming a high-grade micromanager. I refused a lot of it. Having your guardian drop you off on the first day, unless you rolled up in a luxury car, that was social suicide. The irony wasn't lost on me. Going from high school work back to middle school felt like the universe's idea of a cruel joke. She looked at me, then nodded. All right, this is your first day back in a routine since everything. I am not a child. I can handle myself. Fine, she said, smoothing me over. The school has my contact information. So do you. If anything unusual happens with you, fatigue, headache, any of the warning signs we discussed, call me before it becomes a problem. I got it. She waved me off. The first day of school can be difficult. Do your best. She was right about that. Walking into a classroom full of teenagers who'd known each other for years, being the odd one out, yeah, the whole thing made my stomach churn. But it was necessary. If there was one thing the Rinnegan couldn't give me, it was much-needed normalcy and a paper trail. I stepped towards the doorway, and was pulled back before I could leave. 10 photos later of me in my school uniform, wearing an expression that screamed, literally anywhere else would be better, I finally managed to escape. What's up with this lady? The walk to Aldera Junior High took 15 minutes through the quiet suburban streets lined with small houses and convenience stores. It was the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else's business, which explained the curious stares from people watering their gardens or walking their dogs. Great, more attention. Aldera itself was a modest 3-story building with a small courtyard and a sort of worn-down charm. Students in navy blazers clustered around the entrance, some laughing and chatting with familiarity, others looking like they'd rather be literally anywhere else. What struck me most was the diversity. Weird hair colors, unusual eye shapes, strange skin textures, faces that defied conventional anatomy. I was pretty sure I spotted someone with tentacles for arms having a completely normal conversation about weekend plans. Was there no room for traditional prejudices here? Or was it just me temporarily not seeing stuff yet? I took a deep breath. Well, no point standing here all day. The hallways were chaotic. Students rushed past in clusters, their voices creating a constant buzz of conversation. Lockers slammed, teachers shouted reminders about assignments, others somewhere getting scolded for running. The main office was easy to find. A middle-aged woman with wire-rimmed glasses looked up as I approached. You must be Takumi-san, she said with a practiced smile. I'm Mrs. Sato, the vice principal. We spoke with your mother yesterday. I was stunned. Mother? Yes, Mrs. Takumi. You're Ken Takumi, are you not? Quote. Did she not make it clear? I sighed and rubbed my temples. It wasn't really important enough to correct, but leaving it wrong would probably turn into paperwork later. Well, she's my guardian, not my mother. Oh, the woman replied, seemingly thinking that she had touched on a sort of sore topic. Not that she had, but I certainly wasn't going to go out of my way to correct that assumption. Sorry, it's fine. Thank you for the late registration accommodation. Not a problem. Given your unique circumstances, we're happy to help. She handed me a thick folder. Schedule, school map, locker assignment, student handbook. You'll be in class 3B with Mr. Hayashi. I flipped through the schedule. Standard stuff, mathematics, Japanese literature, English, science, social studies, physical education. They'd placed me in advanced sections for most subjects. Mrs. Sato continued, We've placed you with the graduating class. If the material is too difficult, please let us know. I'm sure it'll be fine. After getting directions to my homeroom, I made my way through hallways that were filling with students. Curious glances and whispered conversations followed me, but I kept my expression neutral. Just another new kid, nothing to see here. Room 3B was on the second floor, overlooking the courtyard. I paused outside the door, took a breath, and knocked. Come in. Mr. Hayashi was a thin man in his 40s. From his tired eyes, I could guess he had years of experience dealing with teenagers. He looked up from his desk as I entered. Ah, Takumi-san, I sighed internally again. Seriously. Right on time. Class, we have a new student joining us today. 20+ pairs of eyes turned to stare at me. This is Takumi Ken, Mr. Hayashi continued. He'll be finishing out the year with us before moving on to high school. Please make him feel welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself? I stepped forward, scanning the faces. Most were unfamiliar, but two stood out immediately. In the middle section, looking like he wanted to disappear into his chair, was Izuku Midoriya. Green eyes wide with what looked like shock. And 2 seats in front of him, slouched with his feet up on his desk like he owned the place, was Katsuki Bakugo. His red eyes were locked on me with an intensity that could melt steel. Well, this should be interesting. I'm Ken, I began my introduction. I'm 15. Most of you are probably wondering what I'm doing transferring at this time. Before anyone asks, no, I was not bullied at my last school, nor do I have an embarrassing social history that forced me to transfer. You can investigate if you want. If you must know, I've been away for a while. If you're curious what that means, we can talk it over at lunch and be friends and all, but that's all you're getting out of me for now. I like music, writing, movies, and food. I hate loud noises, bullies, and people who think they're hot shit because they won the genetic lottery. Questions? I asked, finishing my elaborate introduction I had cooked up the night prior. The class was silent, just as I thought I had overdone it and came out as a complete weirdo. A girl raised her hand in the front row. Where were you, if you don't mind me asking? Did she hear nothing I just said? I wondered. Are you choosing to ignore what I just said? Are you going to answer? ... I rubbed my temples. I had amnesia. Long story. Any other questions? Hayashi asked. Several hands shot up. What's your quirk? Are you single? This earned giggles and a raised eyebrow from the teacher. Before I could answer any of them, a voice cut through the chatter like a thunderclap. You. Every conversation died instantly. Students twisted in their seats to look between Bakugo and me like they were watching a bomb about to explode. Which they probably were. Katsuki Bakugo had shot to his feet so fast his chair clattered to the floor. His palms were already crackling with small explosions, his face a mask of disbelief and rising fury. I smiled politely. Hi, neighbor. Long time no see. About 86 hours, give or take. What the hell are you doing here? Transferring in. Didn't you hear the teacher? I glanced at Mr. Hayashi. This is class 3B, right? You can't be here. Why not? Public school, last I checked. This is my school, my class. He jabbed a finger at me. You're supposed to be anywhere but here. Wow, and people say I have a god complex. A few students choked on their laughter. Even Midoriya looked like he was fighting a smile. Bakugo, Mr. Hayashi snapped. Sit down and stop shouting. Like hell, this guy, he's here to attend school. I cut in smoothly. Look, I know it's shocking that someone as amazing as me would share a classroom with mere mortals like you, but let's try to keep the explosions metaphorical. Bakugo's hand sparked violently. I swear, if you open your mouth one more time, you'll throw a tantrum, you bastard. Bakugo. Hayashi's voice rose. One more outburst and you're getting detention before the day even starts. Bakugo looked ready to argue. Pretty obvious from the clenched jaw and twitching fingers, but years of barely restrained self-control won out. With a growl that belonged in a zoo, he yanked his chair upright and slammed into it, arms crossed, eyes burning holes in my skull. Fine, but I'm watching you, Takumi. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. Even Bakugo was calling me by that last name now. I made my way to an empty seat, conveniently located right in front of him. Right back at you, Sparky. The class lost it. Even the serious types couldn't hold back anymore. Mr. Hayashi massaged his temples like he felt a migraine forming. This is going to be a long semester, he muttered. I dropped into my seat and pulled out my notebook, casually ignoring the death glare burning into my back. From my right came a whispered voice. Midoriya whispered, trying not to draw attention. You're really in our class. I gave him a subtle thumbs up. Holy crap, he breathed. This year's going to be insane. He wasn't wrong. The morning, as always, started with a pen as Mr. Hayashi began taking attendance. After the whirlwind of introductions and the barely contained explosion that was Bakugo Katsuki, the room had settled into silence as Mr. Hayashi started droning on about the upcoming mock exams, the kind that determined which high schools would even look at your application. The air in Class 3B was thick with the smell of chalk dust and the collective anxiety of 25 teenagers. For them, the upcoming mock exams were a looming storm front. For me, sitting in a desk that felt slightly too small, it was a strange exercise in time travel. Now, Mr. Hayashi said, tapping a rhythm on his desk with a wooden pointer. As we prepare for the high school entrance track, we have to address the gap in our curriculum. Takumi-kun, he looked at me, his expression softening into a look of professional pity. I've reviewed the materials for your remedial English module. Since you have a medical condition, we'll start with the basics of sentence structure. Don't worry about keeping up with the main lecture today. Just focus on the worksheet I've prepared for you. He walked over, placing a paper on my desk that looked like it was designed for a primary schooler. Subject verb object. The cat sits on the mat. Quote. And just like that, my entire aura built up with my introduction from the moment I stepped into class packed its bags, made a peace sign, and vanished without a second thought. As for me, well, personally, I had never felt so insulted in all my life. I stared at the paper with blank eyes. Simultaneously, I could feel the heat of a smirk radiating from a seat behind. Oi, teach, Bakugo's voice cut through the room, sharp and jagged. Are we really slowing down the whole year because the newbie doesn't know his ABCs? Some of us aren't aiming for bottom-tier schools. If he's behind, put him in a tutor room, not in a class where people are actually trying to get into UA. A few students shifted uncomfortably. Most covered their mouths, seemingly holding something in. Bakugo-kun, that's enough, Hayashi sighed, though his eyes lingered on me with doubt. It's my job to ensure every student. Mr. Hayashi, I interrupted, sliding the cat on the mat worksheet to the corner of my desk forcefully. I appreciate the accommodation, truly. But you don't need to bridge a gap that isn't there. My amnesia isn't this severe. Please, continue with the main lesson. I'd rather see where the standard is before I ask for a handicap. Drastic times call for drastic measures. With one read of the shifting class dynamics, there was no way I was letting this continue. I could tell that if I let this class pass without doing something, my reputation would be in unrecoverable shambles by lunch. Hayashi blinked, adjusted his glasses, and cleared his throat. Very well, if you're sure. We were actually discussing the nuances of the past perfect tense and its application in formal English essays. It's a stumbling block for many. He turned to the chalkboard, scribbling a complex, multiclause sentence about a traveler who had arrived at a station only to find the train had already departed. Who can explain the conditional shift in the second clause and how it affects the speaker's intent? Hayashi asked, looking over the room. Silence. I looked around to gather class reactions. Most were contemplating, others outright ignoring it. Midoriya was scribbling furiously, his brow furrowed. Bakugo on the other hand, looked bored, turning his head away with a dismissive, HMPH. From my understanding of him gathered during our very short interactions, my take would be that he knew the answer, but wasn't going to answer. Perhaps considering the question beneath him. Takumi-kun, would you like to try? Or perhaps you'd prefer to observe? Hayashi asked, his voice tilting toward a gotcha moment to prove I needed the remedial work. The speaker is expressing a missed opportunity through the use of the past perfect, had departed, I replied. It establishes a sequence of events where one action was completed before another began in the past. If you wanted to emphasize the speaker's regret, you'd likely shift the syntax to include a modal verb, like should have or ought to have. I looked around and back to see Mr. Hayashi staring at me. He wasn't just surprised, he looked like I'd just spoken in a forgotten tongue. That is exactly right, Hayashi confirmed, the modal shift, yes. Most students don't touch that until high school. Well, I was a high school student still fresh in school pre-transmigration. Fortunately in my case, there hadn't been enough time to idle my knowledge away. From the back, I heard the sharp snap of a lead pencil breaking. Bakugo, who was unconcerned previously, had his face darken. HMPH. Lucky guess, he muttered, loud enough for the whole row to hear. Probably just memorized one phrase to look smart. If that's the case, Hayashi-sensei, I said, leaning back and crossing my arms, why don't we try something a bit more unscripted? Since Bakugo-kun is so worried about the standard of the class being held back. Well, if Bakugo was willing to play to save my reputation before it fell, then who was I to decline? Hayashi, still riding the high of actually having a student engage with the material, didn't even hesitate. Very well, let's look at the nuances of the third conditional, Hayashi said, his eyes gleaming behind his spectacles. He didn't write on the board this time. If the traveler had known the schedule, he wouldn't have missed the train. Bakugo-kun, can you invert this to emphasize the result rather than the cause? Bakugo's chair screeched against the floor as he sat up. Had the traveler known the schedule, the result would have been his timely arrival. It's a formal inversion. Basic stuff. Correct. Hayashi nodded, then looked at me. And Takumi-kun, can you apply a passive voice to that inversion while maintaining the subjunctive mood? It was a linguistic gymnastics routine. The rest of the class was staring at us like we were speaking a dead language. Midoriya's head was whipping back and forth between us, his pen hovering over his notebook as if he were afraid to miss a single syllable. Had the schedule been known by the traveler, I replied, the train would not have been missed. And if he wanted to express that the situation was entirely out of his control? Hayashi pressed, his voice rising in excitement. The traveler would have to imply that even with the knowledge, the departure was inevitable, I countered. He would use, were the schedule to have been known, the departure remained unavoidable. That's excellent, Hayashi smiled. My. Bakugo frowned. Whatever, so he can read a textbook. Big deal, he's probably been staring at the same 3 pages for a decade while he was hiding in whatever hole he crawled out of. He slammed his textbook shut with a sound like a gunshot. Fine, if he wants to go, then give us something real. Stop playing around with grammar rules for toddlers. Hey, fine with me. Mr. Hayashi, caught in the crossfire of 2 students who were clearly operating on a different wavelength than the rest of the class, was stunned. The other students weren't even pretending to take notes. They were just watching the back of Bakugo's head and my face like it was a championship match. Fine, Hayashi said, his professional curiosity overriding his better judgment. Bakugo-kun, translate. No sooner had the hero arrived than the threat was neutralized, yet the collateral damage remained a point of contention. The hero's arrival was followed immediately by the suppression of the threat, Bakugo spat out. However, the resulting destruction continued to be a subject of public debate. It's an inversion of the no sooner than structure to emphasize the speed of the action. Correct, Hayashi whispered. Takumi-kun, the same sentence, but shift the focus to the psychological state of the civilians involved using a mixed conditional. Had the hero not arrived with such haste, the civilians would now be mourning, yet they remain critical of the methods used, I replied without a second of hesitation. Hey, the causative form of the same, Bakugo challenged. The hero had the threat neutralized at the cost of the infrastructure, causing the public to remain divided, I shot back, finally turning my head enough to lock one eye onto his crimson one. Direct speech conversion with a passive emphasis. The threat having been dealt with, the hero said, is all that matters, though the public would argue otherwise. The back and forth was so fast it was dizzying. Every time Bakugo fired a complex clause, I caught it and threw it back. Every time I showcased a level of nuance that usually took years of immersion to master, Bakugo met it with the sheer, stubborn force of his own intellect. In the next few seconds, I came to a genuine conclusion. Holy shit, Bakugo, you actually know stuff. This kid was a genius. Enough, Mr. Hayashi finally gasped, holding up both hands. He looked genuinely exhausted, as if he had been the one doing the mental gymnastics. That is, quite enough. I think we can skip the remedial work, Takumi-kun. In fact, I might have to ask the office for materials from the high school department just to keep you occupied. The silence that followed was absolute. For a kid who was supposed to be a blank slate, my English wasn't just good, it was quite literally native. I shrugged, trying to look as nonchalant as possible while my brain privately thanked my former life's English teachers. Like I said, sensei. No gap. Crack. The sound of another pencil sacrificing its life echoed through the room. Lucky. I'm sorry, Sparky, what was that? Shut up, idiot. Don't think you're some kind of genius because you can play word games. You're still dead weight. Whatever you say. The temperature in the room seemed to spike by 10 degrees. I could hear the faint, warning hiss of sweat beginning to vaporize against his palms. Bakugo-kun, Takumi-kun, that's enough, Mr. Hayashi interjected. You've both done very well. Now open your textbooks to page 42. We have actual curriculum to cover. The rest of the period was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Bakugo didn't glare at me again. Instead, he became a demon of productivity. Every time Hayashi asked a question, Bakugo would answer before the teacher had even finished the sentence. I didn't engage this time, which seemed to irritate him even more. The next hour was controlled chaos, with Hayashi-sensei trying to maintain normal classroom atmosphere while Bakugo radiated barely contained rage from 2 feet away. Every few minutes he'd shift in his seat, and I could practically feel the heat coming off him. Now, if we look at the Battle of Sekigahara, Hayashi droned on, pointing at his crude battlefield sketch on the blackboard. I took notes partly because the subject was actually interesting, and partly because half the class kept sneaking glances at me instead of paying attention. The other half watched Bakugo like he was a ticking time bomb. Not long after, a folded paper landed on my desk. I opened it discreetly. Are you really friends with Bakugo? I glanced around, caught the eye of a brown-haired girl in the second row trying to look casual while obviously waiting for my response. Define, friends, I wrote back. When she read it, she had to cover her mouth to keep from laughing. Another note, different question. What's your quirk really? Rumors say you fought a villain. This one from a boy near the window who looked like he lived on hero magazines. It's complicated, I replied. Then someone from the back threw a paper that wasn't very well aimed. Whether by accident or design, I couldn't tell, but it should have hit me in the head. Instead, it stopped about 8 centimeters away, just floating there. Damn, it's floating, the thrower said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The entire class, including Hayashi, turned to stare at the suspended paper note hovering near my head. Might as well own it. I turned around to look at the boy with stretchy fingers who'd thrown it. My Rinnegan fading away in the process. You're probably curious, but don't throw stuff at my head. Turning the eye on had a minimum chakra consumption. So even for something this small, it consumed a lot of chakra. Silence. Then the classroom exploded into whispered conversations. By the time the bell rang, I had a small collection of notes asking everything from quirk details to relationship status to high school application plans. Teenage social dynamics were apparently universal across dimensions. The bell finally rang for the transition to lunch. Lunch break, Hayashi announced, wiping sweat from his brow. Try to keep the academic enthusiasm to a minimum in the hallways. Everyone immediately began filing out. I stood up and watched as a gloomy Bakugo got up from his chair and walked right past me. Want to go grab lunch? Don't think this changes anything, bastard, he said with a sullen face. You're still an extra in my way. And I don't care how many words you know. You'll never beat me. He stalked out, his footsteps sounding like small detonations. I watched him leave, eyebrows furrowed. Right, rule number 1 of my hero. Bakugo's an asshole. I looked down at my desk, then at the cat on the mat worksheet that was still sitting there. I picked it up, folded it into a sharp, precise paper airplane, and flicked it toward the trash can. It landed perfectly. Well, better find the cafeteria, I thought, heading to the doorway as I scrubbed my eyes. Seriously, was that display really that taxing? Why did my eyes feel sore? Takumi-san, could I speak with you? I stopped, turning to see Mr. Hayashi calling. Oh, sure, to be continued.